Chapter 3290. Yuan Zhong could not help but glance at Tian Ruojing and said, "Then how do you think we should find Lin Sun?" Tian Ruojing was silent for a moment and said, "He left with the celestial sect 2 days ago. I'm afraid there's almost no hope of finding him now." She thought for a moment and then said, "However, I heard that all favored can only leave behind a complete grand Tao on the Tao Evolution Divine Tablet of the 4 great sects in order to leave. If we really can't find Lin Sun, we can only wait near the Tao Evolution Divine Tablet." Yuan Zhong nodded. He did not expect to get a satisfactory answer from Tian Ruojing, so he was not disappointed. He looked at a person beside him and said, "Elder Lu, pass today's news to Supreme Elder Zhu Qing. With his wisdom, he will definitely know what to do." Yes. The man called Elder Lu received the order. Celestial Pavilion. As one of the 4 orthodoxies of the Tao evolution world, Celestial Pavilion occupied a secret realm under the sky of the Tao evolution world. Lin Sun actually appeared in a second-rate force called the Celestial Sect in the Eastern Territory, Zhu Qing murmured. He was the first person on the immortal path of the Celestial Pavilion and the leader of the 7 mandate envoys of the Gen tribe. In the Tao evolution world, he could be said to be a dominating existence. After hearing the news, Zhu Qing was quite excited at first. After all, they had been searching bitterly for more than a year and had not found any trace of Lin Sun. But when he finished reading the news, Zhu Qing frowned. Lin Sun had already escaped. Searching for him again was no different than looking for a needle in a haystack. We must find him before he attains the immortal path. Otherwise, it will not be easy to kill him after he attains the immortal path. After a long time, Zhu Qing made a decision. Send all the forces of the 4 orthodoxies and all the forces in the world to search for Lin Sun. On that day, the 4 orthodoxies, Celestial Pavilion, Divine Court, Demon Sect, and almost all the immortal figures of their sects went out. On that very day, the 12 first-rate powers and numerous second-rate and third-rate powers that were scattered throughout the Tao development world received orders as well. All of them didn't dare dally and dispatched their respective forces to cooperate with the forces of the 4 great sects to launch a heaven-encompassing search and capture operation with the Eastern Territory where the Celestial Sect resided as the center. Such a large-scale operation caused the entire world to be in an uproar, and it caused a great uproar. For a time, the matter related to Lin Sun spread and discussed like a storm throughout the world, and it became the topic that all the cultivators in the world paid the most attention to. In the Eastern Territory, groups of practitioners could be seen everywhere in the deserted wilderness, and all of them were searching for Lin Sun. The scale of it could be said to be extremely magnificent. Half a month passed quickly. Ningyan City. In a tea-house, Lin Sun and Qing Heng were enjoying tea. "Fellow Taoist, the situation is getting worse." Qing Heng lowered his voice, his expression solemn. These days, he and Lin Sun had been staying in Ningyan City and learned about the changes in the world. Just like at this moment, the name Lin Sun was being discussed everywhere in Ningyan City. The small ones hide in the forest, while the big ones hide in the city. Most of the people in Ningyan City are ordinary people, and those cultivators mostly have low cultivations. It's absolutely impossible for us to be noticed while we're hiding here. Lin Sun drank tea as he spoke with a smile. "Not to mention, I like the name of this city." Qing Heng was still filled with worry. It would be bad if an eternal figure enters this city to search. Lin Sun passed over a jade slip. A profound technique is recorded within this jade slip. It's sufficient to conceal one's aura and deceive the heavens. Even an eternal figure would find it difficult to see through it. Qing Heng received the jade slip and heaved a sigh of relief, and then he couldn't help but say, "Fellow Taoist, wouldn't it delay your cultivation if we continue hiding here?" Ningyan City was only an ordinary small city. It had no abodes or spirit veins, and it was utterly unable to satisfy the cultivation of imperial ancestor Ju Sun. Most importantly, when imperial ancestor Ju Sun cultivated, it would definitely cause a drastic change in the aura of heaven and earth. That kind of movement would definitely attract a lot of attention. For example, in this half a month, Qing Heng hadn't seen Lin cultivate at all. Obviously, he knew that once he started cultivating, he would definitely attract attention. Even if he set up restrictions to conceal it, it wouldn't work. This was because there were no spirit veins in Ning'an City. When a cultivator absorbed and refined the power of heaven and earth, it would definitely cause a disturbance in the Zhou Su phenomena. Especially when imperial ancestor Ju Sun cultivated, the disturbance would only be greater. In the eyes of an eternal figure, they could deduce a lot of information just from the disturbance caused by cultivation. But if he didn't cultivate and just hid in Ning'an City, perhaps he wouldn't be discovered in a short period of time. But as time went on, there was no guarantee that there wouldn't be some unpredictable accidents. This was the problem that worried Qing Heng. Seeing Qing Heng's frown, Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh. You may not know, but I've been cultivating. You just don't know. You've been cultivating? Qing Heng was startled. That's right. Lin Sun nodded, but didn't explain. Alas, I'd better not worry about it. Qing Heng shook his head and focused on drinking tea. Lin Sun didn't say anything more. He listened to the discussions in the tea-house leisurely and calmly. For a favored like him, breaking through to the immortal realm wasn't difficult at all. The difficulty was that he needed to deduce a complete great way to heaven. This great way was different from his own great way. It was evolved from comprehending the heavenly way of the Tao development world. Moreover, although Lin Sun was a favored, he borrowed Qing Feng's body, soul, and memory. Therefore, when deducing this great way, he would be restricted by Qing Feng's talent and bone structure. In short, Qing Feng didn't have the talent of devouring abyss, and his bone structure wasn't very good. In addition, the heavenly way of the Tao development world was different from the world Lin Sun came from. Under these conditions, Lin Sun had to find another way to deduce a brand new great way to heaven. This was the Tao development. Moreover, developing a brand new great way to heaven was absolutely not an easy thing even for a boundless realm figure. For example, Zhu Cheng and the other emissaries of destiny that were distributed in this world had been trapped here for countless years. Until now, they were only at the perfection realm of the immortal path of the Tao, and they were unable to deduce a Tao path that led to eternity. Only by deducing a Tao path that led to the eternal realm would a favored have the opportunity to leave the Tao development world. However, it was a piece of cake for Lin Sun to overcome these difficulties. The reason was that early on in the mortal transformation world, along with him defeating all the Tao images in the universe Tao laws, he'd simultaneously deduced numerous great ways that led to eternity from these Tao images. Now, merely deducing a great way to heaven that was suitable for Qing Feng from the universe Tao laws of the Tao development world wasn't a difficult thing for Lin Sun. For example, half a year before the return of the 5 great Tao bodies, they'd already deduced a Tao path that was truly suitable for Qing Feng. Moreover, during this half a month in Tranquility City, Lin Sun seemed to have done nothing, but the 5 great Tao bodies within his body had always been cultivating. At the bottom of it all, Qing Heng didn't know that the core of the cultivation of a favored was to comprehend the universe Tao laws and use this to develop the Tao, and it wasn't to painstakingly temper one's own cultivation. Time flowed by day after day. Another half a year passed in a flash. Lin Sun had always been staying in Tranquility City. During this period of time, there were even eternal realm figures that entered the city to search, but none of them were able to see through Lin Sun and Qing Heng's true identities. Qing Heng was completely at ease when he saw this. Moreover, during this half a year, Lin Sun had already helped him completely deal with the injuries on his foundation of the Grand Tao, and it allowed Qing Heng to rekindle hope towards his future path towards the Tao. On this day, Lin Sun, who was drinking wine in a restaurant, was suddenly stunned, and he put down the wine cup in his hand and muttered to himself, "It's almost time to leave." Qing Heng's entire body shook and he said, "Leave? Where to?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "First gather some power to consolidate the Tao, and then go to the 4 great orthodoxies. When I get rid of those enemies, I'll leave." Qing Heng was a little confused. Taoism peer, but you still have the cultivation of Juetian emperor ancestor. Won't you expose your identity if you do this now? Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. Wrong. My Tao has been deduced to the immortal path. What I lack now is the power that matches my Tao. Qing Heng became more and more confused. His Tao had been deduced to the immortal path, so why was his cultivation still at Juetian emperor ancestor realm? Why was he still lacking power? Lin Sun was about to say something, but he suddenly stood up and walked out of the restaurant. From now on, we'll take Tranquility City as the starting point and go to Immortal Pavilion. The power collected on the way should be enough to meet the needs of my Tao. Although Qing Heng didn't understand, he hurriedly followed Lin Sun. Clatter, he suddenly noticed that Lin Sun's secret method to hide his aura had disappeared, and his cultivation of Juetian emperor ancestor realm was revealed at this moment. He didn't even hide his aura anymore, and it soared up to the sky. Taoism peer, you are. Qing Heng's expression changed. Naturally to collect power. Taoism peer, just follow behind me. Lin Sun clasped his hands behind his back and walked out of the city. Qing Heng's expression changed, but he still gritted his teeth and followed. Just as they walked out of the city, a whistling sound came from afar. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A group of cultivators with Emperor Realm cultivation moved through the void, and in a few blinks of an eye, they rushed out of the city. Obviously, they were attracted by the aura of Juetian Emperor Ancestor that Lin Sun revealed. It's him. Celestial Sex Supreme Elder Qing Feng. One of the emperors trembled, and revealed a look of ecstasy. Finding Qing Feng was equivalent to finding favored Lin Sun. The cultivators all revealed a look of joy, and found it hard to believe. They had been searching for so long, but Lin Sun had actually appeared in front of them without any disguise. How could they not be surprised? Lin Sun smiled and said leisurely, "I'll give you a chance. Spread the news to inform the others, or it will be too late to call for help." Chapter 3291. The great emperor's expressions changed, and they turned to flee. Of course, they would pass on the message, but it was more important to save their lives. Everything would be over if they lost their lives. Swoosh. They teleported through the void. They came quickly, but they fled even faster. Moreover, they didn't come close and stood far away, so it was easier for them to flee now. Do you think you can escape? Lin Sun reached out with his right hand and snapped his fingers. Buzz. Invisible shackles of the Great Tao emerged and suppressed the group of martial emperors, causing them to be like insects stuck in a spider's web. They were trapped there and powerless to struggle. Damn it. Their expressions changed and fear rose in their hearts. Qing Heng, who witnessed this scene, was startled. He had merely snapped his fingers and suppressed a group of emperors. What kind of supreme technique was this? Don't panic, everyone. I'm not a bloodthirsty person, and I disdain to make things difficult for small fries like you who are ordered around. In the indifferent voice, Lin Sun had already stepped forward and flicked his fingers. Whoosh! Rays of treasure light flashed from the great emperors, and in the blink of an eye, all their treasures were plundered. Even the treasures hidden in their bodies were not spared. The great emperors' faces turned green, but compared to being slaughtered, this scene made them heave a sigh of relief. Compared to their lives, some treasures were nothing. Lin Sun said, "Next, I'm going to understand some things from your souls. You'd better not struggle, or don't blame me for not warning you if your souls are injured." As he spoke, the great emperors felt a pain in their sea of consciousness, and an extremely powerful consciousness drilled into them. In the next moment they became dazed. After a while, Lin Sun retracted his consciousness and turned to Qing Heng. "Let's go to the Crimson Serpent Immortal Sect first." The souls of these Emperor Realm experts allowed Lin Sun to find out that under the orders of the 4 great sects, the 12 first-rate powers of the Tao development world had dispatched 36 eternal figures to hold down the fort in the Crimson Serpent Immortal Sect. These undying beings were led by the Supreme Elder of the Immortal Pavilion, Yuan Zhong. They were in charge of gathering a group of emperors from various factions to patrol the mountains and rivers, searching for traces of him. Yuan Zhong was one of the 7 heavenly mandate messengers of the Zhen tribe. Whoosh, whoosh. Lin and Qing Heng swaggered away. On the other hand, the restraining force on those imperial emperors had vanished without a trace. At this moment, all of them couldn't help but feel fortunate, as if they'd survived a calamity. "This guy actually let us go," someone muttered and seemed to still not dare believe it. "Previously, I thought this favored Lin Sun was an unforgivable villain. But now it seems he's completely different from what I imagined," someone sighed. "Should we still release the news?" someone could not help but ask. Everyone fell silent. After a while, someone said, "Didn't you hear what Lin Sun said just now? He's going to the Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect to take revenge. Even if we don't spread the news, his tracks will soon be exposed to the world." Many people were shocked. Right, he revealed his tracks in front of a Ning city and didn't conceal his aura at all. He clearly doesn't intend to conceal himself anymore. So he's really going to fight with his life on the line? He only has Imperial ancestor Juing. How can he be a match for those immortals with his cultivation? Just you wait. It won't be long before the world knows whether Lin Sun is dead or alive. Lin Sun strode forward at a speed that was neither fast nor slow. He didn't conceal the aura of Imperial ancestor Juing at all. When looked at from afar, he seemed like a god that illuminated the sky. "Fellow Taoist, you really intend to kill your way to the Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect?" Qing Heng could not help but ask. Lin Sun's current actions were simply too bold. He didn't conceal anything at all, and he seemed to be eager to alarm his enemies and make them come looking for him. Most importantly, Lin Sun was heading towards the Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect. "I need strength, and the fastest way to obtain strength is naturally to seize the spoils of war from my enemies," Lin Sun said casually. "In other words, I really hope that my enemies will come looking for me as soon as possible." His voice carried a trace of anticipation. Qing Heng gasped, and he was completely shocked by Lin Sun's thoughts. He'd cultivated for many years, but it was the first time he'd experienced such an inconceivable thing. In next to no time, a wave of the sound of the air being torn apart resounded from afar. A group of imperial emperors flashed over from extremely far away like gods that were patrolling the landscape, and it was actually the 2 imperial ancestors in the lead. This group was obviously much stronger. In the Tao development world, it was sufficient for most cultivators in the world to look up to them. "Over there! It really is the Celestial Sect's Qing Feng and his senior brother, Qing Heng. Ha 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 ha. We've searched high and low for them, only to find them by chance. Everyone, come with me to capture the 2 of them. Once we succeed, we'll definitely be heavily rewarded." The cultivators of this group were extremely excited, and their faces were covered in delight. They seemed as if they were about to capture a prey that they desired for a long time. Rumble! They charged over anxiously from afar in a threatening manner. Qing Heng couldn't help but reveal an expression of being unable to bear the sight of this. A familiar scene appeared. Lin Sun snapped his fingers, and then the figures of those cultivators that were charging over stopped in midair in unison. All of them seemed like geese that had their necks grabbed. Under their dazed, terrified, and dazed gazes, Lin soon walked forward and took away all the treasures in their possession with a flick of his sleeve. This caused their expressions to become even more astounded, and it was extremely brilliant. Even Qing Heng couldn't help but reveal an expression of pity when he saw this. No matter who it was that suffered such a blow, that person would probably be stunned to the point of doubting life, right? In next to no time, Lin Sun and Qing Heng turned around and left. Amidst the mountains and rivers, those cultivators had recovered their freedom. All of their countenances were ghastly pale, and they seemed as if they'd lost their souls. Up until now, they still hadn't figured out why they'd been instantly restrained. This meant that if Lin Sun wanted to kill them, then it would simply be no different than crushing a group of ants. After that, group after group of cultivators flashed over successively, and all of them had been drawn over by the aura emanated by Lin Sun. All of these cultivators were from various powers, and the largest group consisted of over 10 people, while the smallest group consisted of 5 or 6 people. Moreover, there was no lack of figures at the ultimate imperial ancestor realm. It wasn't exaggerated to say that if it was Qing Heng himself, then he would have probably fallen into despair and collapsed a long time ago. After all of them were dazzling figures that stood on the Emperor Dao of the Dao development world, and every single one of them were renowned and terrifying existences. But at this moment, in Qing Heng's eyes, these groups of cultivators were like prey that had walked right into a trap. They were like prey that had walked right into a trap. They'd arrived hastily, and then they'd been stripped of all their treasures. Especially when he noticed the changes in their expressions, Qing Heng couldn't help but sigh on many occasions. Why bother? All of this allowed Qing Heng to fully realize that while Lin Sun's current cultivation seemed to be at the ultimate imperial ancestor realm, his combat strength was already capable of sweeping through all cultivators at the same cultivation realm in the world. The news of Lin Sun's appearance had spread, and it entered into the ears of all the eternal figures of the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect in the shortest amount of time possible. In an instant all of them were excited and excited. This fiend has finally appeared, and the time to exterminate him has finally come. Some people were extremely smug. Haha, I knew long ago that in our inescapable search and capture operation, he's destined to have nowhere to hide, nowhere to hide. Someone laughed and said, these eternal figures from the various first-rate factions were all eager to make a move. Seeing this, the Grand Elder of the Immortal Pavilion, Yuan Zhong, frowned and said coldly, do you really think that Lin Sun is so easy to deal with? This one sentence caused the undying beings to be startled. Don't blame me for speaking harshly. In the eyes of us favored, you're just a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. You don't even know what a favored is. Yuan Zhong said coldly. The eternal figure's expressions flickered, but no one dared to refute him. Yuan Zhong said, Lin Sun's appearance is naturally a good thing, but we can't be careless because of this. On the contrary, we need to be even more cautious and careful. Someone couldn't help but whisper, Lord Yuan Zhong, according to the information we received, Lin Sun still has the cultivation of sovereign ancestor Ju Sun and hasn't set foot on the immortal path. If that's the case, why are we so afraid of him? The others didn't understand either. Yuan Zhong said coldly, then did you notice that not only has Lin Sun shown himself, but he's also rushing over to the Scarlet Cut Immortal Sect? That, everyone's eyes flashed. I believe that all of this means that Lin Sun most likely has enough power to fight against immortals. That's why he dares to come to us so boldly. Tian Ruojing, who was standing next to Yuan Zhong, suddenly said, in this kind of situation, it's not a bad thing to be a bit more careful. In the past, these eternal figures wouldn't even place a sovereign ancestor like Tian Ruojing in their eyes. But it was different now. They all knew that Yuan Zhong valued Tian Ruojing and had kept her by his side during this period of time. Then what do you think we should do? Asked Yuan Zhong. Tian Ruojing muttered, wait for him to come to us. That's the only way we can gather all our forces to eliminate him. Of course, I'm very doubtful if he really dares to come. After all, there are so many seniors here. Any ordinary person wouldn't do something so stupid. Yuan Zhong said, waiting for him to come is exactly what I think. But in the end, you still don't understand what a favored is, and you don't understand how dangerous Lin Sun is. He seemed to sigh and murmured, if he was an ordinary favored, how could we 7 heavenly envoys attach so much importance to him? Why would we mobilize all the forces in the world to hunt him down? He swept his gaze over everyone and said, to put it bluntly, you will only have a chance to kill him before he sets foot on the immortal path. But once he sets foot on the immortal path, you people won't be enough for him to kill. Everyone's expressions changed. Chapter 3292. Yuan Zhong was a grand elder of the immortal pavilion, and he was also a favored. His words also made those undying beings' views towards Lin Sun subtly change, their expressions becoming slightly more serious. Tian Ruojing couldn't help but say, what you mean is that it's very likely that Lin Sun will kill his way to the Crimson Cut immortal sect? Yuan Zhong muttered, it's hard to say, but it's never a bad thing to be prepared. Everyone nodded subconsciously. Lai Yong. Yuan Zhong looked at a white-robed man and said, from now on, you will be in charge of commanding all the forces here. If Lin Sun comes, try your best to take him down. The white-robed man was called Lai Yong, and he was a supreme elder of the Crimson Serpent sect. He was an existence that had stepped foot onto the eternal path towards the rebirth god realm. Yes. Lai Yong accepted the order solemnly. On that day, Yuan Zhong brought Tian Ruojing back to the celestial pavilion. My lord, what are we going to do by returning to the celestial pavilion now? On the way, Tian Ruojing couldn't help but ask. The Crimson Serpent Immortal Sect has already become a place of trouble, and fortune and calamity are difficult to predict. For safety's sake, I should naturally leave. Yuan Zhong's eyes flashed as he said casually, if Lin Sun comes, we can use Lai Yong and the other immortals to test Lin Sun's current capabilities. Tian Ruojing's expression changed slightly, and she felt a chill in her heart. She did not expect that Yuan Zhong would use the lives of Lai Yong and the others to test Lin Sun. If Lai Yong and the others won, then so be it. But if he lost, he would have no chance of surviving. Yuan Zhong glanced at Tian Ruojing and said, do you think I'm too cold and heartless? Tian Ruojing shuddered and whispered, my lord has his own considerations. How would I dare to speculate? Yuan Zhong grinned and said, there's no harm in telling you that, if it wasn't for the Tao development world, those eternal figures aren't qualified to be pawns for us. His voice was filled with disdain and arrogance. Thinking about it, which favored wasn't a terrifying existence that had stepped into the boundless eternal Tao. In their eyes, undying beings were indeed very weak. Of course, Tian Ruojing didn't understand. She was just a great ancestor. However, she was very smart. She never speculated about things she didn't understand. It was precisely because of this that Yuan Zhong treated her differently and brought her along. I only hope that Lai Yong and the others will be able to succeed. Otherwise, this matter will really be troublesome. Yuan Zhong seemed as if he was talking to himself, and the light in his eyes changed indeterminately. He didn't tell Tian Ruojing that he left the Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect because he thought of a possibility. Presently, Lin Sun had developed a complete path towards the eternal Tao. If that was the case, although Lin Sun looked like Zhu Xian's great ancestor, as long as he had enough power, his cultivation would advance by leaps and bounds and he would reach the immortal realm. This was the reason why Yuan Zhong had left the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect. He needed to return to the Celestial Pavilion to discuss countermeasures with Zhu Qing and the other Heavenly Mandate envoys. At the end of the day, it's all because I couldn't kill you when he was still weak, which led to today's events. Yuan Zhong sighed in his heart. In the next few days, The atmosphere in the crimson-cut immortal sect was extremely somber. 36 undying beings, led by Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect's Supreme Elder Lai Yong, recuperated and made ample preparations. However, as time passed, as more and more news flew in like snowflakes, that austere aura, the atmosphere was also shrouded in a heavy and oppressive shadow. 57 of them have been defeated by Lin Sun. 54 of them have been defeated by him. Scarlet Serpent Immortal Sect, within a palace, an undying said solemnly, "The scariest thing is that none of Lin Sun's opponents were able to last a single move." The other undying beings' expressions were also uncertain. Over the past few days, although there were many pieces of news, the contents were shockingly similar. Lin Sun was rushing towards the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect, and all the cultivators that tried to obstruct him on the way had been crushed. Who wouldn't be vigilant? Someone muttered, "He is strong, but according to the reports, he is only a progenitor of great Emperor Juing. Don't forget, Lord Yuanzhong once said that favored can't be judged by common sense. This Lin Sun has already defeated so many people, how could he not know that we are guarding this place? But he is still rushing towards the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect. I'm afraid he really has the power to fight against undying beings." Someone was deeply worried. "What are we afraid of? We are 36 undying beings. How can we not fight against him alone?" Someone else was indifferent. "There is no need to argue," Lai Yong said solemnly. "A few days ago, when Lord Yuanzhong left, he told us to face him seriously. If he really dares to attack, we will just kill him." His voice was filled with undisguised killing intent. This was the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect, and he was the Supreme Elder of the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect. Facing such a situation, the only thing he could do was to guard this place. These days, Qing Heng was in a completely numb state. Along the way, he saw too many cultivators charging over aggressively, and then being turned into fish on a chopping board, robbed by Lin Sun one by one. Among those cultivators, there were too many famous and powerful existences. In the past, they were all characters that could summon the wind and summon the rain in the Tao development world. It was even to the extent that some ferocious figures were sufficient to make Qing Heng feel extremely fearful. But before Lin Sun, they suffered the same fate. They were like moths that flew into a flame, beasts that walked into a trap. Not a single one of them was able to escape Lin Sun's plunder. Moreover, not a single one of them had been able to escape. When he saw such scenes on numerous occasions, Qing Heng's terror at the beginning had become numb. Every single time he saw cultivators charge over, his heart wouldn't fluctuate at all. "The Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect is up ahead, right?" Suddenly, Lin Sun's voice resounded by Qing Heng's ears. The latter was first stunned, and then he suddenly recovered from his numb state. An expanse of mountains had appeared in the distance. They were covered in towering peaks, rosy clouds, and a myriad of strands of boundlessly brilliant divine radiance descended from the sky. Wind Cliff Mountain. Yes, that's where the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect resides, Wind Cliff Mountain. Qing Heng's expression became serious while anxiousness and anxiety that he hadn't felt for a long time started to spread throughout his body. He already knew that there were 36 immortal figures residing in the Crimson Refinement Immortal Sect now, and every single one of them could be said to be a terrifying overlord that he could look up to. Yet now, Lin Sun had slaughtered his way over and was about to start a battle with these terrifying overlords. How could Qing Heng not be nervous? "Fellow Taoist, have you gathered enough strength?" Qing Heng couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun shook his head. "I'm still lacking a lot. However, it should be barely enough if I capture these immortal figures here." "I'm still lacking a lot," Qing Heng was stunned. He was both worried and speechless. If that was the case, then what could he use to fight those immortal figures? "Just stand here and don't move. I'll go. Come." Lin Sun glanced at Qing Heng and flashed straight towards the distance. Qing Heng was just about to chase after Lin Sun when he found his figure was confined there by an invisible force, and he was utterly unable to take another step forward. "Fellow Taoist, you must be careful," Qing Heng reminded anxiously. "It's those enemies that should be careful," Lin Sun said without turning back. The corners of Qing Heng's mouth twitched. He was really puzzled as to why Lin Sun was still so confident at a time like this. Shouldn't he be more cautious in the face of a formidable enemy? Seeing Lin Sun's lonely figure gradually approaching the crimson-cut immortal sect, Qing Heng felt for the first time that his previous understanding of cultivation was greatly impacted. Woo woo woo, a desolate horn sound came from the Wind Cliff Mountain, and the world was instantly filled with a murderous and oppressive aura. Obviously, those bigwigs in the crimson-cut immortal sect had already noticed Lin Sun's arrival, and they reacted immediately. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Terrifying immortal auras rushed out from the Wind Cliff Mountain one after another, like divine rainbows flashing across the sky, startling the 9 heavens and 10 earths. They were impressively the 36 immortal existences, including Lai Yong. Along with their appearance, the world lost its color, the mountains and rivers dimmed, and an invisible and terrifying pressure spread like a tide, causing Qing Heng, who was extremely far away, to hold his breath and change his expression in shock. Such a lineup even made him, the Juxian Emperor's state of mind, feel like collapsing. "Lin Sun, you actually dared to come here?" A surprised voice rang out. The one who spoke was a purple-robed, white-haired youth, carrying a huge golden saber on his back, and the immortal halo on his body was as bright as the sun, shining brightly. "If I didn't come, wouldn't all of you have waited for so many days in vain?" Lin Sun smiled, and the wind was calm. He was alone, standing in the void, and didn't have much shocking aura on him, but his calm and confident attitude made the immortal existences involuntarily raise their eyebrows. "We are also following orders. As long as you choose to surrender, we naturally won't make things difficult for you," Lai Yong said in a low voice. Lin Sun was too calm. Even though his body was only surging with the Juxian Emperor's aura, it made him feel unfathomable. "I naturally know that you are all following orders, and I don't want to make things difficult for you. How about this? As long as you hand over your treasures, I will leave immediately. How about it?" Lin Sun said with a smile. The immortal existences were stunned. This was the first time they were threatened like this, so much so that their expressions became somewhat ugly. This guy. Did he really think that they, the immortal existences, were just decorations? "If you want us to hand over our treasures, that's fine, but you have to defeat us first," the purple-robed, white-haired youth said coldly. "Why not?" Lin Sun sneered and stepped into the air, heading forward. Rumble. At the same time, the aura on his body erupted like a volcano that had been dormant for a long time. With every step he took, his aura skyrocketed, the heaven and earth shook, and the formless, terrifying aura grew stronger. When he took 9 steps, with him as the center, the space around him suddenly collapsed, creating a sharp whistling sound. In the distance, the 36 undying existences felt the pressure on their faces, causing their expressions to change. In the blink of an eye, Lin Sun, who was originally only at the Juxian Emperor's cultivation, now had the aura of a nirvana realm undying. This shook their hearts, they couldn't believe it. Chapter 3293. A strong sense of uneasiness rose up in the hearts of Lai Yong and the other undying beings. Attack! Without hesitation, they moved out together. Rumble! All sorts of blinding, undying lights surged up, intertwining into a powerful current that shook the universe. All sorts of undying Tao soldiers filled the sky. There were seals, whisks, celestial swords, cauldrons, rui. The lights were blinding and released unparalleled power. This current of power was all heading towards Lin Sun alone. The heaven and earth wailed, all things dimmed. That scene made Qing Heng's hairs stand on end. But Lin Sun shook his head, seemingly disappointed. The reason was that he had experienced far too many of these scenes. Back when he was at the Heaven Longevity Realm, he could destroy them with a flip of his hand, let alone now. Rise! His sleeves fluttered, instantly waves of sword cries resounded, an endless amount of sword intent appeared in the heaven and earth. Whoosh! A ray of sword energy appeared and swept across the sky. The combined attack of the 36 undying beings was like a piece of cloth, easily tearing a huge hole in it. It scattered like the tide. Rumble then, a terrifying explosion resounded, the heaven and earth flipped, the sun and moon flipped, an endless amount of sword intent fell down like the Milky Way, covering the entire world. The sword intent was too strong, turning the heaven and earth white. No! Screams of fear rang out. Fellow Taoist, please show mercy. We admit defeat. Someone shouted and admitted defeat. Very quickly, the dust dispersed, the sword intent that covered the world disappeared, the mountains and rivers returned to their usual calmness, their vision also became clear. Then, Qing Hing saw that the 36 undying beings' faces were ashen, each of them had fear and confusion written all over their faces. And on their throats, there was a crystal-clear ray of sword energy. Qing Hing was completely dumbfounded. One strike wiped out 36 undying beings. This completely overturned their understanding, making them fall into a state of shock like never before. Looking at Lin Sun again, his robe was fluttering, standing alone, as calm and collected as before. But now, in everyone's eyes, Lin Sun was like an unparalleled god, making them feel indescribably small and powerless. No one could have imagined that a mere ancestor of Zhu Shui's level of cultivation would suddenly have such terrifying power. All of this was like a nightmare, and it was so unreal. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the air seemed to be frozen. Now, are you all satisfied? Lin Sun spoke indifferently. His voice drifted through the heavens and the earth, causing the bodies of Lai Yong and the other undying figures to tremble, and they seemed as if they'd awoken from a dream as they recovered from their terror. We'd admit defeat, Lai Yong said bitterly. The others were also dejected. With a single strike, he had suppressed them. This made them deeply understand what it meant to be a disparity in strength. Previously, they had thought that even if Lin Sun was a favored, he wouldn't be impossible to fight against. But now they knew just how terrifying a favored like Lin Sun was. Hand over all your treasures and I won't make things difficult for you, Lin Sun said. The sword chi was still at their throats. This made Lai Yong and the others dare not hesitate, and they all handed over all their treasures one by one. Lin Sun stretched out his hand, and all these treasures were put into his bag. Then he asked, "Why don't I see the Supreme Elder of Immortal Pavilion, Yuanzhong? Lord Yuanzhong left a few days ago," someone said bitterly. Lin Sun was startled. He thought for a moment and then understood. He said in a mocking voice, "This guy is smart. He withdrew in advance, and only left you people to test my strength." Lai Yong and the others heard this and looked at each other. Their hearts suddenly shook, as if they finally reacted. So it turned out that Yuanzhong had already sensed something was wrong a few days ago? Their faces all turned ugly. If this was the case, they were undoubtedly a group of abandoned pawns being used. Fellow practitioner, although you defeated many opponents these days, why didn't you kill anyone? Seeing Lin Sun about to leave, Lai Yong couldn't help but ask. The others also turned their gazes over. You are not my opponents. After saying this, Lin Sun floated away with Qing Hing, who was still deeply in shock. Lai Yong and the others had complicated expressions as they watched Lin Sun and the others leave, and their hearts roiled. The four great orthodoxies they served had taken them to be pawns that could be abandoned at any time. On the other hand, Lin Sun's opponent hadn't injured a single one of them even when he occupied the upper hand. Such a comparison caused them to have indescribably complicated feelings in their hearts, and it could be said that they had mixed feelings. On this day, the news of Lin Sun suppressing 36 immortals before Wind Cliff Mountain spread out, and it caused a mighty uproar in the Tao evolution world. The powers and cultivators of the various territories were extremely shocked and stirred by it. Immortal Pavilion. Within an abode. Zhu Cheng's brows were knit tightly together when he put down the jade slip he'd just obtained. Yuan Zhong was right. Lin Sun has developed a complete path towards the eternal Tao. His voice was low. As the #1 expert of the Immortal Pavilion, Zhu Qing was the leader of the 7 emissaries of destiny that Tribe Zhen had left behind in this world, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Not far away from Zhu Qing sat the other 6 emissaries of destiny, and they were the supreme elders of the Divine Court, Demon Sect, and Demon Sect. A few days ago, when Yuan Zhong brought Tian Ruojing back to Immortal Pavilion and told them about Lin Sun, Zhu Qing had immediately ordered all the emissaries of destiny that were scattered in the other 3 great orthodoxies to gather. It has only been 2 years, yet this kid has comprehended the laws of this world and developed a supreme path towards the Tao that's suitable for Qing Feng. Isn't this too terrifying? Yuan Zhong's expression was solemn. If it wasn't for this, the Lord wouldn't have ordered us to find Lin Sun in the shortest amount of time, no matter what, and kill him while he's weak. Zhu Qing sighed. But it's slightly too late to say all this now. With our cultivation, we've long since surpassed all the immortals in this world. Even if Lin Sun attacks us, we have nothing to fear. A skinny man in a black robe spoke in a deep voice, his eyes cold. That's right. If Lin Sun wants to leave this world, he must leave his path on the Tao Evolution Divine Tablet of Immortal Pavilion. We only need to set up a trap here and wait for him. A young woman in a green dress said softly. Zhu Cheng's gaze swept across the others, and he said in a deep voice, "In these years we've cultivated many immortals in the 4 great orthodoxies. It's time to put them to use. Next, we'll gather all of them and guard Immortal Pavilion together, waiting for Lin Sun to walk into the trap." Also in Immortal Pavilion. In a pavilion, Tian Ruojing was restless and lost in thought. Her intuition told her that Lin Sun would definitely not let her go. Even if there was no enmity between her and Lin Sun, because of the relationship with Qing Feng, things had become different. Qing Feng, your life is really good. Tian Ruojing secretly gritted her teeth, her eyes full of hatred. Who would have thought that Lin Sun would have such a terrifying favored? How could such a terrible favored appear in the body of a trash like Qing Feng? Most importantly, Qing Feng was the obstacle in her heart to prove immortality. But obviously, if Lin Sun didn't die, it meant that Qing Feng wouldn't be in trouble, and all of this would make it almost impossible for her to prove immortality. If I had known this, I would have used all means to get rid of you that year. Tian Ruojing's beautiful face was gloomy. She didn't regret it. Even if Qing Feng saved her life that year, even if she violated her oath and refused to be Qing Feng's cultivation companion, she never regretted it all these years. Even now, she only hated herself for not killing Qing Feng at that time. Half a month later, in a mountain and river, Lin Sun opened his eyes from meditation, and the aura on his body had already shown the charm of the transcendent realm of immortality. I don't know where summer solstice is now, and how far her cultivation has reached. Lin Sun thought of summer solstice. After a while, he shook his head and stood up. Qing Heng, who had been cultivating nearby, suddenly woke up and stood up. When he felt the aura of transcendent realm from Lin Sun, his heart trembled again. Taking a deep breath, Qing Heng said, "Senior, are you planning to go to Celestial Pavilion?" Even the way he addressed Lin Sun changed. In fact, in the eyes of the peerless emperor ancestors, those who had stepped into the immortality realm were all seniors that they could only look up to and respect. Lin Sun glanced at him and said, "You should call me fellow Taoist." Qing Heng was a little embarrassed. "If I'm not wrong, the Celestial Pavilion is now a dangerous place. But for me, it's not that dangerous," Lin Sun muttered, "and after I get rid of those opponents, I'm afraid it won't be long before I leave this world." As he spoke up to this point, He looked at Qing Heng. How about this? Taoist friend, you should come with me. When the time comes, you can arrange for the celestial sect to cultivate in the celestial pavilion. This can be considered as my compensation and repayment to Qing Feng and you. Qing Heng was stunned. When he was still worried about what kind of danger Lin Sun would encounter on the way to Celestial Pavilion, Lin Sun had already thought about arranging the whole Celestial sect in Celestial Pavilion. This made him feel unreal. How horrible the 7 destiny messengers were, but Lin Sun didn't pay attention to them. Let's go. Lin Sun didn't know what Qing Heng was thinking. He was just doing what he should do. 3 days later, under a piece of sky, Lin Sun's figure floated over. Qing Heng had hidden in Fengxia Spiritual Mountain, and Fengxia Spiritual Mountain had been put away by Lin Sun. At this time, Lin Sun stood in the void with his hands behind his back, looking up at the snow-white, auspicious cloud below. After a while, he suddenly stretched out his finger and drew a line in the distance. Buzz! The snow-white, auspicious cloud rolled violently, and then an illusory door appeared. This was the entrance to Celestial Pavilion. Come to think of it, those enemies should have already been prepared. While thinking, Lin Sun took a step forward and rushed into the illusory door, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Lin Sun killed his way in like this. These days, with the spread of all kinds of news, countless practitioners had already gathered in this mountain and river. When they saw this scene, they were all in an uproar and trembled. 3 consecutive updates first, and there will be more in the evening. Chapter 3294. Within the Celestial Pavilion's secret realm. The sky was vast, and the celestial mountains stood in great numbers. It was a scene of paradise. However, as soon as Lin Sun entered it, he was ambushed. Boom! A total of 10 Transcendent Realm Immortals formed a formation and activated a forbidden Supreme Divine formation, trapping Lin Sun within it. The formation was vast and contained 100,000 stars. It connected with the power of heaven and earth, surging with wind, thunder, earth, and fire. Being trapped within it was like being trapped in hell. Even if it was a transcendent realm cultivator, he would be severely injured if not killed by such an attack. However, Lin Sun seemed to have expected this. The moment he was surrounded, he took a step in the air. Boom! Endless divine flames surged out and turned into a storm that swept across the sky. The 100,000 stars within the supreme forbidden formation were instantly drowned by the flames and turned into ashes. Following that, the power of heaven and earth, wind, thunder, earth, fire, and other miraculous images were all burned. In the end, the entire formation collapsed. As the endless flames spread, the 10 Transcendent Realm Immortals were forced to retreat. Their expressions changed drastically. How can he be so powerful? Exclamations sounded. In the sky full of flames, Lin Sun's silhouette was like a god born from fire. The unparalleled divine aura made the Transcendent Realm Immortals' hearts turn cold. You're not my opponent. I advise you to move aside. As Lin Sun spoke, he strode towards the distance. Kill! Stop him! However, the 10 Transcendent Realm Immortals did not retreat. Instead, they all charged towards Lin Sun in an attempt to stop him. Lin Sun frowned slightly and no longer hesitated. Go! He extended his hand and pointed in the air. Clang! 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 The boundless rain of swords surged into the heavens and the earth amidst clear and melodious sword howls, and they filled the sky. As the terrifying sword intent swept through the surroundings, dazzling amounts of blood instantly sprayed into the air. The 10 Transcendent Realm Immortal silhouettes were torn apart like paper. They were all crushed by the boundless sword intent, and their bodies and souls were destroyed. If other cultivators were to witness such a scene, they would be scared silly. Zhu Qing, as the mandate envoys of the Gen tribe, you actually sent the cultivators of this world to their death. Don't you feel ashamed? Your sect master Tai Chu's face has been completely lost by you. Lin Sun said loudly. His voice was like a thunderclap, and it rumbled and resounded throughout the entire secret realm. For a moment, the mountains and rivers were shaking, and the void around was in turmoil. Lin Sun's voice was everywhere in the secret realm of the Celestial Pavilion. This kid is truly arrogant. In the deepest part of the Celestial Pavilion's secret realm, there was a snow-white, crystal-clear divine mountain. Zhu Qing, Yuan Zhong, and the other 6 heavenly mandate envoys stood at the peak of the divine mountain. A light screen floated in front of them, showing the figure of Lin Sun, who had just charged into the Celestial Pavilion's secret realm. They had witnessed everything that had happened earlier, and all of them had grim expressions on their faces. He naturally has the right to be arrogant. Can't you see that his cultivation has already reached the transcendent realm? Zhu Cheng's expression was solemn. He took a deep breath, and a resolute look appeared on his face. According to the previous plan, let the others act as well. Lin Sun strode forward, and his divine sense spread out. Along the way, he didn't conceal himself at all, and just dashed forward openly. Boom! Soon, a group of immortal and transcendent realm existences rushed over, and all of them manipulated their secret treasures to attract the Celestial Pavilion's order power. The Celestial Pavilion's secret realm's order power began to attack Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. The Celestial Pavilion's heaven and earth order was filled with a faintly discernible aura of chaos origin. Moreover, there were also various supreme mysteries of the path of cultivation that appeared within it. As a result, the power released was terrifying beyond imagination. A part of the Celestial Pavilion's order power should come from the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet. Lin Sun vaguely understood. Rumor had it that the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet was formed from the chaos origin of the Tao world. If the favored wanted to leave this world, they needed to develop a path of cultivation that led to the heavens and imprint it on the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet. When they obtained the tablet's recognition and resonance, they would be able to attract the Chaos Tao fruit and break through the Heaven Gate. But now, the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet's power had clearly fused with the heaven and earth order of this world, and it was being borrowed by those immortal beings. When those immortal beings charged over, Lin Sun immediately attacked with all his strength. Boom! He punched out, and a vast and heavy fist energy seemed to break through the ages. It carried an indomitable momentum as it swept out mightily. The nearby void exploded, splitting apart and collapsing. And the heaven and earth order power that was borrowed by the enemy also suffered a great impact from this punch. They were ruthlessly destroyed and dispersed with a loud bang. That level of fist energy even sent the group of Undyings flying back in disarray. Instantly, cries of alarm rang out. Those immortal beings' expressions changed, and they were terrified. In the end, this power doesn't belong to you, and its power isn't something you can unleash. Lin Sun shook his head slightly. As he spoke, his figure flickered. In just an instant, figures were killed one after another, and blood splattered high into the air. And in just a few breaths, those enemies were all slaughtered. Damn it! Even the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet's power can't do anything to him. How is this possible? At the peak of the snow-white divine mountain in the depths of the immortal pavilion, Yuan Zhong couldn't help but be furious when he saw this scene, and he revealed an expression of disbelief. When he looked at the other envoys of destiny, all of their expressions were extremely gloomy, and their eyes were filled with seriousness. There's only one possibility. Zhu Cheng's voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Lin Sun didn't just deduce an immortal path. He even derived the profundities of the eternal path on this path. Only in this way can he resist the attack of the Divine Tao Evolution Tablet's power. These words were like a bolt out of the blue, and it caused everyone to be stunned. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that we're already inferior to him on the path of the Tao evolution? Someone's voice was low, and his expression was extremely unsightly. In the Tao evolution world, Being able to deduce a great Tao that led directly to the eternal path was equivalent to possessing the opportunity to leave this world. For example, the 7 envoys of destiny like them had cultivated bitterly in this world for countless years, yet they were still stuck at this last step and were unable to develop a path that led to the eternal path. But Lin Sun had only arrived in this world for 2 years, yet he'd already accomplished this. So how could they not suffer a blow from such a comparison? My lord is right. Not being able to annihilate him when he was weak means that our chances of dealing with him have become slim. Zhu Cheng's voice revealed a wisp of bitterness. They originally thought that Lin Sun had only deduced a complete immortal path, and in this way, they were confident in being able to annihilate him. But only now did they realize that Lin Sun had touched upon the profundities of the eternal path a long time ago, and he was far ahead of them. We must evacuate as soon as possible. Yuan Zhong gritted his teeth as he spoke. There's no chance. Zhu Cheng looked towards the distance. There was a tall figure walking over from there, and he had an extraordinary bearing and was carefree like an immortal. It was exactly Lin Sun. The hearts of Yuan Zhong and the others sank when they saw this scene. I'm sorry for making all of you wait. Far away, Lin Sun stood in the void and said calmly. We really didn't expect that in less than 2 years, fellow Taoist Lin has already developed a supreme path that leads directly to the eternal path. Now it would seem like our arrangements today are a bit laughable. Zhu Qing let out a long sigh. Lin Sun, can we both make a compromise? We won't stop you from leaving this world, so don't force us into a dead end. Yuan Zhong spoke abruptly. The others looked at Lin Sun as well. As far as they knew, Lin Sun hadn't harmed a single opponent on his way to the Crimson Cut Immortal sect a few days ago. This made them subconsciously think that as long as they took the initiative to admit defeat, then Lin Sun might not make things difficult for them. A trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of Lin Sun's mouth as he said, The reason those cultivators in this world attacked me was none other than because they received your orders. Now, don't you think it's ridiculous that you want me to let the culprits go? His words made everyone's hearts sink to the bottom. Lin Sun, even if you can kill your way out of this world, you'll still have to face the murderous intent of the bound of universe and the challenges of the path of slashing. Even if you have the chance to enter the mysterious God realm in the end, the 9 divisions of primordial God path, the ape ancestor, and the young lady will definitely not let you off. Someone said in a cold voice. What happens in the future has nothing to do with you. Don't worry about it. Lin Sun smiled. Boom. Right at this moment, Zhu Qing, Yuan Zhong, and the other destiny envoys all moved and charged at Lin Sun at the first possible moment. Each of them revealed a terrifying combat strength that far surpassed those in the same realm in this world. This was the strength of favored. This was also the reason why Zhu Qing and the others could dominate this world. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was also a favored, and a favored who was even more powerful than them. He had long developed the power of the eternal path. It seems that all of you can't wait to leave. Then I'll send you on your way. Lin Sun's carefree voice was still floating in the air when he leaped forward and slashed out with his fingers like a sword. Puff! Yuan Zhong's figure was cut into 2. Before his blood could flow, his body and soul were wiped out by the terrible sword intent. Then, as Lin Sun slashed out with his sword intent, the destiny envoys fell one after another. It was as easy as cutting melons and vegetables. That terrifying slaughtering method didn't give the Heaven's Mandate envoys any chance to escape. In the end, only Zhu Qing was left. Lin Sun grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. Zhu Qing was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that the 7 of them were so fragile that they couldn't even withstand a single blow. When he realized this, it was already too late. Looking at the confusion and fear on Zhu Cheng's face, Lin Sun smiled and said, Don't be nervous. After I search your soul, I'll send you on your way. Boom. A huge divine consciousness swept into Zhu Cheng's sea of consciousness. He blacked out and groaned in pain. A moment later, Lin Sun retracted his spiritual awareness. In his hand, Zhu Qing, who was captured, suddenly turned into ashes and scattered between his fingers, disappearing completely. Last month, I owed the Awadara brothers 2 explosive updates. Recently, I'll try to update more every day to make up for it. Chapter 3295. From the moment Lin Sun entered the Immortal Pavilion to the moment he killed Zhu Qing and the other 6 messengers of destiny, it was far less than a quarter of an hour. Lin Sun's speed was so fast that he killed almost all the way without encountering any worthy enemy. At this moment, he looked around and suddenly asked, "Where is Celestial Pavilion's sect master Shui Tsonglu?" His voice reverberated throughout the world. "Senior, please forgive us. The Celestial Pavilion has no intention of becoming enemies with you." A fearful voice rang out, and an old man with gray hair and beard appeared even faster than the voice. He stood in the air and bowed, his face filled with apprehension. This person was Celestial Pavilion's sect master Shui Tsonglu, a Nirvana God realm undying existence. Your Immortal Pavilion possesses the Tao Evolution Divine Tablet, so it's naturally the easiest for favored to target you. I won't bother with that. Lin Sun glanced at him and said, "But I need you to do one thing." Shui Tsonglu hurriedly replied, "Please instruct me, Senior." Lin Sun immediately told them about how to settle down the people of Celestial Sect. Shui Tsonglu heaved a sigh of relief. He had thought that it would be some overboard request, but who would have thought that it was just to arrange for a few cultivators? "Senior, just leave it to me." Shui Tsonglu agreed without hesitation. "After I leave this world, Qingfeng will also stay in the Celestial Pavilion. With him around, the Celestial Pavilion's power should not be weaker than before," Lin Sun said casually. Shui Tsonglu's heart trembled. He knew that Lin Sun's words were actually a warning to him not to have any other thoughts. Otherwise, the existence of Green Peak would be enough to threaten the Immortal Pavilion. When Lin Sun was about to say something, he suddenly raised his eyebrows. The next moment, his figure disappeared out of thin air. Whoosh! A beautiful figure flew towards the entrance of the Celestial Pavilion. She wore a snow-white dress, had fair skin, and a peerlessly beautiful appearance. Shockingly, it was Tian Ruojing. However, right now, her expression was terrified. Her face was pale and she appeared to be panicking. Seeing the entrance of the Celestial Pavilion appear in the distance, Tian Ruojing secretly heaved a sigh of relief. That fellow only cares about killing the enemy. I'm afraid he has long forgotten about a small character like me, right? That was even better. Just as Tian Ruojing thought of this, her face suddenly changed and her figure stopped in midair. Right at the entrance of the Celestial Pavilion, a figure stood in the void. It was Qingfeng, or rather, Lin Sun. Tian Ruojing's heart sank to rock bottom. She was stunned for a moment before she suddenly cried out, "A grand favored, a supreme existence is actually making things difficult for a minor character like me. Should I feel honored or should I feel sorrowful?" Lin Sun looked at the woman who Qingfeng had been obsessed with for 900 years and said, "The one who tied the bell should untie it. I will solve the karma of Qingfeng." Tian Ruojing said agitatedly, "What does his matter have to do with you, Senior? Or does Senior also think that I need to apologize and repent for what happened back then? Impossible." She seemed to have gone mad, and her beautiful face twisted. "I never regretted what I did in the past. Why should I marry him just because he saved my life? Why should I be responsible for his Tao root being injured?" Lin Sun's eyes became cold. "You said that you would marry him, but you regretted it. Of course, you can regret it, and you don't care about Qingfeng's Tao injury. But don't forget who saved your life back then. Can you even turn a blind eye to the life-saving grace?" Tian Ruojing's beautiful face changed. She gritted her teeth and said, "I didn't ask him to save me back then. He took the initiative to save me. What does it have to do with me?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Even he didn't expect that a person could say such shameless words. It was such a woman who made Qin Feng infatuated with her for 900 years, which made Lin Sun feel that it was unfair for Qin Feng. Senior. Tian Ruojing took a deep breath and said, "If you want to see me kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy, then you are wrong. I would rather die than bow my head to a trash like Qin Feng." Lin Sun said, "You're wrong. After I leave, Qin Feng will possess the cultivation of transcendent realm perfection and possess a complete supreme cultivation path. Although he'll be limited by the power of heaven and earth rules in this world and can't leave the Tao development world in this lifetime, he can always stand at the peak of the world in the Tao development world. And you are just the Juetian emperor ancestor after all." These words were like a ruthless sharp knife stabbing into Tian Ruojing's heart, making her breathless. Her skin trembled, and her expression changed again and again. A trash who had been hated and rejected by her for 900 years would become the supreme existence that she could only look up to in the future. Such a blow made her feel like she was about to collapse. "Even so, I won't bow my head. I will only hate him more," Tian Ruojing said in a hoarse voice, and her eyes were bloodshot. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly smiled. He felt that the obsession that belonged to the deepest part of Qingfeng's heart had completely disappeared at this moment. In other words, Qingfeng's obsession of 900 years was broken at this moment, and his state of mind was freed. "I forgot to tell you one thing. In your heart, Qingfeng is a karma obstacle, and in his heart, you are also like a heart demon," Lin Sun said softly. "Now, Qingfeng's heart demon has been eliminated." Tian Ruojing was stunned, and then she sat down on the ground with a thump as if she was struck by lightning. Her eyes were blank. "It turns out that you told me so much just to help Qin Feng get rid of his heart demon. But I still don't understand why you help him like this?" She was very angry and puzzled. Lin Sun said, "Helping him is helping myself. If his obsession is not eliminated, I can't really leave this Tao development world. This is karma. Do you understand?" Tian Ruojing was disappointed and said bitterly, "Forgive me. I am the karma that can threaten you in this Tao development world," Lin Sun said with surprise. "You are smart. Your guess is right. If you had realized this earlier, it might have been enough to cause me great trouble. Unfortunately, your road was narrow from the beginning." After that, Lin Sun turned around and left. He didn't help Qin Feng get rid of Tian Ruojing. If his speculation was right, Tian Ruojing was destined to live in endless remorse in the future until her state of mind could no longer bear the pressure of the karma obstacle and collapsed. This kind of punishment was far more cruel than killing her. "Just because he saved my life, how could I become like this?" Tian Ruojing, who sat paralyzed on the ground, had a blank look in her eyes. On that day, she was mercilessly expelled by the cultivators of Immortal Pavilion and left to wander in the outside world. With Shui Kenlu, the sect master of Immortal Pavilion, personally coming forward, Qing Heng and the cultivators of Celestial Sect were arranged to cultivate in Immortal Pavilion. From this day on, they all became members of Immortal Pavilion, and there was no more Celestial Sect in this world. Qing Heng, Fu Yunzi, and the others couldn't help but feel like they were dreaming. Before this, they were just an inconspicuous second-rate force in the Eastern Territory. In the blink of an eye, they all entered Immortal Pavilion, one of the 4 most powerful orthodoxies in the world. Everyone in the sect had ascended to heaven in a single step. Grand Marshal Uncle is actually a favored. To Chunning and Daiyan, all of this was even more bizarre. Especially when they thought about how they served Lin Sun a while ago, and didn't have much respect for him, they couldn't help but feel ashamed in their hearts. "The 2 of you come here. These are the cultivation manuals that Senior Lin Sun gave to the 2 of you. Remember, don't leak them to others." Sect Master Fu Yunzi came and handed 2 jade strips to Chunning and Daiyan. "For us." The 2 of them were stunned for a moment, and then started laughing foolishly. Fu Yunzi couldn't help but feel envious. He already knew that Lin Sun had defeated the Seven Heavens Mandate envoys. How could he not know that the cultivation manuals left behind by Lin Sun were bound to be extraordinary? You two foolish brats really got lucky. Fu Yunzi couldn't help but mutter. Immediately after, he also smiled. To him, the entire celestial sex cultivators being able to cultivate in Immortal Pavilion was already an unimaginably fortunate thing. In the future, who would dare to say that Master Uncle Qing Feng is the shame of the sect? Fu Yunzi couldn't help but think that when favored Lin Sun left, Master Uncle Qing Feng would possess a transcendent realm immortal cultivation. At this moment, Lin Sun was looking at a strange and mysterious divine stele. This divine stele stood in the Immortal Pavilion's forbidden area. It was only 3 feet tall, and its entire body was filled with the aura of Chaos Source. There were no words on the surface of the stone stele. However, when Lin Sun looked at it, he could feel that this divine stele was imprinted with many paths leading to the heavens. Each path was complete and powerful, leading directly to the eternal realm. When he carefully sensed it, he couldn't see through the mysteries of these paths. Lin Sun wasn't surprised by this. This was because this was the divine stele of Tao Evolution World. It was formed by the chaos source of the Tao Evolution World. Favored could only imprint a complete path on it in order to attract the chaos Tao fruit and leave this world. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun suddenly transmitted his voice. Shui Canlu was in the secret realm of Immortal Pavilion arranging various matters for the celestial sex cultivators. Suddenly, Lin Sun's voice resounded in his ears. If a woman comes looking for me in the future, no matter what her name is, no matter what her identity or appearance is, please inform me at the first possible moment. Shui Canlia's body trembled, and he solemnly accepted the order. Yes. From this day onwards, Lin Sun sat cross-legged in front of the divine stele and meditated. He was trying to comprehend the chaos source of the Tao Evolution World. The news of Lin Sun killing his way into the Immortal Pavilion, defeating the 4 great paths, unifying the transcendent realm immortals, and killing the 7 mandate envoys had already spread throughout the Tao Evolution World, causing an unprecedented sensation. Half a month passed in a hurry. On this day, under the sky, the white auspicious cloud at the entrance of the Immortal Pavilion floated there as before. A man and a woman came from afar. The man was thin and was a young youth. He was cautious and nervous, looking around from time to time with vigilance. He followed closely behind the woman, as if he was afraid that she would leave him behind. The woman was only in the sea of spirit realm, and her appearance was ordinary. She looked up at the white auspicious cloud and thought for a while. Then, she said to the youth beside her, "Wait here." The youth asked nervously, "Sister, where are you going?" The woman pointed at the white auspicious cloud in the sky. Immortal Pavilion. As soon as he finished speaking, a wave of laughter resounded in the surroundings, and numerous murmurs of discussion resounded along with it. Many cultivators pointed at the pair of siblings while their faces were filled with ridicule. A true martial realm youth and a sea of spirit realm woman actually dared to dream of entering the Immortal Pavilion? The 5th update was delivered. Chapter 3296. There were old and young people in the mountains and rivers nearby, and they were all cultivators who desired to enter the Celestial Pavilion to cultivate. There was no lack of geniuses or people of noble birth. However, not everyone could enter the Celestial Pavilion. If one wanted to enter, one had to try their luck. Out of thousands of people, there might not even be one who could succeed. However, this still couldn't stop the cultivators of the world from coming over to try their luck. The man and the woman were obviously from poor families based on their attire and temperament. Moreover, their cultivation levels were extremely low. When they tried to enter the Celestial Pavilion, it naturally caused a lot of mockery and ridicule. There was even someone who laughed without malice. If people like them can enter the Celestial Pavilion, I'd be willing to work for them. The person who spoke was a young man of noble birth. He was dressed in a golden robe and looked very handsome. Hearing his words, the people in the surrounding area couldn't help but laugh. This made the young man next to the woman even more nervous. His face turned red, but he didn't dare to say anything. His embarrassed look made the young man in the golden robe laugh loudly again. However, the woman didn't seem to notice it at all. Or rather, she turned a deaf ear to it and ignored it. Wait here. As the woman spoke, she flew into the air and approached the white, auspicious cloud in the sky. This scene silenced the crowd. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. Where did this ordinary-looking woman get the courage to go directly to the entrance of the celestial pavilion? Wasn't she afraid of being chased away just like that? In the past, there had been many people of noble birth or extremely talented people who went to the entrance of the celestial pavilion in an attempt to gain the favor of the masters of the celestial pavilion. However, without exception, they were all chased out and chased away. The ignorant are indeed fearless, someone chuckled. One look and you can tell that she came from a small place and doesn't know any rules. Does she really think that she can enter the celestial pavilion just because the entrance is there? Why don't she take a look at her own cultivation level and identity? The others laughed as well. It was as if they could already see the woman being chased out. In front of the white, auspicious cloud, the woman stood in the air and directly knocked on the door. Whoosh, the auspicious cloud rolled, and an illusory door appeared. Just as the woman was about to approach, a loud shout rang out, "Who are you? How dare you barge into my celestial pavilion?" It was just a single voice, yet it was filled with a dignified expression. It caused the hearts of all the cultivators in this expanse of the world to tremble, and all of them went silent like cicadas in the winter. On the other hand, the gazes they shot at the woman were filled with ridicule and pity. She was about to suffer a calamity. To everyone's surprise, the woman was calm and fearless. "I'm here for Lin Sun." Lin Sun. The name seemed to have a strange magic, which shocked everyone nearby and made them gasp. This woman was too bold to call Lin Sun's name directly at the entrance of the immortal pavilion. On the ground, the cautious boy was also nervous, and his hands and feet were sweating. He didn't know why his sister insisted on coming here and called Lin Sun by his name. It was too bold. The atmosphere became deathly silent. However, the scene they were waiting for did not happen. The woman stood there and was not expelled. The imposing voice that came from the entrance of the celestial pavilion did not ring out again. This unusual scene caused everyone to be surprised and bewildered. Very soon, boom! The divine light at the entrance of the celestial pavilion flowed, and a mighty and dignified figure appeared out of thin air. He had gray hair and an immortal aura. "My God, it's the leader of the celestial pavilion!" An old man cried out involuntarily, and then he realized he had lost his composure. He hurriedly prostrated on the ground and kowtowed. "I'm a descendant of the Hongliang Mountain Yu clan. Greetings, senior." Seeing this, how could the others in this expanse of the mountains and rivers not understand the identity of the mighty figure? Plop, plop. Many people immediately knelt on the ground and saluted respectfully. "Greetings, senior." In the end, even the golden-robed young man and the others knelt down with devout, excited, and submissive expressions. No one had expected that the supreme leader of the celestial pavilion would show himself at this moment. Seeing this, the cautious and nervous young man panicked, and he subconsciously wanted to follow the others to kneel down. But just at this moment, the voice of the woman resounded. "If you kneel down, you're not my younger brother anymore." The voice was clear and sweet. The young man was stunned and at a loss. The people who knelt on the ground were also stunned, and they almost couldn't believe their ears. Then, they realized that the ordinary-looking woman standing at the entrance of the celestial pavilion had been standing there the whole time. Even when facing the leader of the celestial pavilion, she didn't show any signs of bowing to him. Everyone was stunned. Wasn't she courting death? At this moment, Shui Tsang Lu, who was worshipped like a god, retracted his aura and revealed a kind and gentle smile. He said to the woman, "Miss, please wait for a moment. Senior Lin will be here soon." The woman nodded and didn't say another word. That indifferent attitude made it seem as if she wasn't facing the leader of the Celestial Pavilion, whom all the cultivators in the world looked up to, but an ordinary passerby passing on news. This caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Their bodies stiffened, and their eyes were filled with confusion. What was going on? That was the leader of the Celestial Pavilion. How could he be so humble and kind to a woman in the spiritual ocean tier? What made everyone's scalp numb was that both the woman and the leader of the Celestial Pavilion appeared very natural, without a trace of discomfort. "Oh, by the way, is that young man your younger brother?" Shui Tsang Lu asked softly. The woman nodded. "Little friend, please come and see me." Instantly, Shui Tsang Lu's expression became more and more kind, and he waved at the reserved young man standing on the ground. After that, he seemed to realize something and chuckled. "I forgot that true martial realm martial artists are still unable to fly here." As he spoke, he landed on the ground, grabbed the young man's hand, and said with a smile, "Come with me." Then, he took the young man and flew away. Witnessing this scene, the atmosphere around the mountains and rivers became more and more silent. Everyone's eyes stared blankly, and their bodies and minds suffered an unprecedented shock. Even if they racked their brains, they still couldn't imagine how such a bizarre thing could happen in this world. After the young man was brought to the entrance of the Celestial Pavilion, he stood beside the woman cautiously with his head lowered, not daring to look at Shui Tsang Lu. His heart was beating violently, and his mind was blank. He was just a young man from the countryside. How could he have imagined that he would experience such an incredible thing today? Only the woman was very calm. Voila! Not long after, there was a fluctuation at the entrance of the Celestial Pavilion, and a figure appeared. It was Lin Sun. Shui Tsang Lu, who had been waiting, was shocked, and he bowed respectfully. "Greetings, senior." Lin Sun nodded, then looked at the woman and smiled. "Xia Ji, you're finally here." The woman was naturally the body and soul that Xia Ji had borrowed in this world. Xia Ji pointed at the reserved and nervous young man beside her and said, "Lin Sun, this is Mu Xian, the younger brother of my identity. He and I depend on each other, so when I came here, I brought him along." Lin Sun nodded, and patted the shoulder of the young man named Mu Xian with a smile. "Little guy, don't be nervous. Come with me with your sister." He was about to enter the Celestial Pavilion with Xia Ji and Mu Xian, when Xia Ji pointed at the young man in a golden robe, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "That guy just said that if Mu Xian and I could enter the Celestial Pavilion, he would work like a horse for us. But in my opinion, it's just wishful thinking. I don't need this kind of person to work like a horse for me." Her words scared the young man in the golden robe so much that he almost paralyzed on the ground, and his soul left his body. How could he have imagined that this pair of brother and sister, who were obviously born in a poor family, had such a great background? Not only did the headmaster of the Celestial Pavilion personally welcome them, even the favored Lin Sun came out. Looking at the others, they were all scared out of their wits, and their bodies were trembling. At this moment, how could they not understand that this pair of brother and sister had an extremely terrifying background? When they thought of how they had ridiculed them before, they were all nervous and frightened. Lin Sun was startled, and when he looked over, he couldn't help but be speechless. He is indeed not worthy. Let's go, there's no need to pay attention to him. Xia Ji nodded, and together with Mu Xian, they followed Lin Sun into the Celestial Pavilion. The headmaster of the Celestial Pavilion, Shui Tsang Lu, stayed behind. The warm and kind smile on his face had already disappeared, and he became dignified and indifferent. His gaze swept across the people kneeling on the ground, and he said coldly, "Come in." Immediately, 2 descendants of the celestial pavilion rushed out from the entrance, and bowed respectfully. "Tell me everything that happened here," Shui Tsanglu said. Immediately, the 2 descendants of the celestial pavilion told him everything that had happened after Xia Ji and Mu Xian had appeared here. After hearing all this, Shui Qianlu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and laugh coldly. "What a bunch of blind bastards! You even dared to mock Senior Lin's friend. I have to say that people like you are indeed not qualified to work for him." His words made the young man in the golden robe and those who had mocked Xia Ji and Mu Xian feel as if they had been struck by lightning, and they lost their souls. "Remember their origins and names, and then chase them away. From today onwards, all the clans and forces related to these people are not allowed to take even half a step near the celestial pavilion." After coldly saying these words, Shui Qianlu turned and left. With his status as the headmaster of the celestial pavilion, he couldn't be bothered to deal with those small fries. He could just let the descendants of the celestial pavilion handle it. The 2 descendants of the celestial pavilion looked at each other, and then at the cultivators on the ground, with an extremely indifferent expression. And the cultivators present were not just shocked, but desperate and on the verge of collapse. Shui Qianliu's words were like a death sentence to them and the forces behind them. Who would have thought that just because they ridiculed the pair of brother and sister, they would suffer such a big disaster in the end? This was called disaster comes from the mouth. At the same time, in the secret realm of the celestial pavilion, looking at the ordinary-looking Xia Ji, Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder, "It's been 2 years. Why is your cultivation still at the sea spirit realm?" Chapter 3297. Xia Ji raised her eyes and said, "When you came to the Taoism world, you said that you would keep a low profile and try not to attract attention." Lin Sun was stunned and said with a smile, "So, you have been staying in the sea spirit realm?" "Yes." Xia Ji nodded and then glanced at Mu Xian beside her. "He didn't know I was a favored before coming here. However, I've developed a complete path that leads directly to eternity." Lin Sun raised his thumb and praised, "Great." Xia Ji smiled lightly and was very happy. Mu Xian was particularly nervous, and his body and mind were in a state of dizziness. He was just a poor boy in the countryside who had never been out of the countryside before. But now, he came to the immortal pavilion and saw many supreme figures who were like immortals. Under such impact, his mind was in a trance. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and suddenly said to Mu Xian in a gentle voice, "Little guy, don't let your imagination run wild. Whether it's a step to the sky or a big dream, just remember that you are Mu Xian." This voice carried a strand of the energy of the Grand Tao, and it struck directly at Mu Xian's mental state, causing him to instantly feel as if he'd been struck on the head and jolted awake. His messy thoughts dissipated, and he relaxed and calmed down. He looked at Xia Ji beside him and said with courage, "Sister, although I don't know why such a strange thing happened, I will try my best to understand it in the future." Xia Ji nodded. Lin Sun was lost in thought. It could be said that a country boy accidentally reached the sky in a single bound and got involved in such an opportunity. There were advantages and disadvantages, but as long as his mind was not lost, it was enough. At this moment, Lin Sun thought of Qingfeng. His talent was not good, but Lin Sun had the means to develop a Tao for him. On the one hand, it was because of Lin Sun's cultivation experience and wisdom. In the final analysis, even if Qingfeng's aptitude was not good, he also had the hope to aspire to the Tao. Otherwise, even if Lin Sun had the supernatural power, he couldn't do all this. Mind, life, talent, Tao. Lin Sun's mind was like a flash of lightning, and he was enlightened. Every life in the world had its own talent, and everyone had the opportunity to walk on a Tao of their own. In order to prove one's Tao, it wasn't about the strength of one's talent, it was about one's temperament. If one's mind was like a spirit platform, undying and indestructible, then the great Tao could be expected. Why was it that, out of all the living beings in the world, there were so few cultivators who could reach the peak on the great path? First, he was restrained by the fetters of wealth, companionship, law, and land. But the most essential core was the state of mind. Setbacks, hardships, complacency, arrogance, and willfulness. Any matter of the 7 emotions and 6 desires, as long as one had experienced the ups and downs of the world, it was the easiest to breed negative karma in one's heart. This was the core reason why most cultivators in the world were unable to step foot onto the peak of the Grand Tao. What unparalleled genius! What heaven-defying talent! As long as one's nature is not lost, even an insignificant ant will have a chance to reach the heavens. Perhaps this is the true meaning of life, Lin Sun murmured. After witnessing the birth of various talents in the spiritual Tao world and experiencing all the things in the Tao development world, Lin Sun had a further understanding of the way of life. 10 days later, Summer Solstice woke up from meditation. Her cultivation had broken through from the sea spirit realm to the immortal transcendent realm great perfection. This was normal. She had already developed a complete great path leading to the eternal realm, but she had deliberately stayed in the sea spirit realm before. Summer Solstice's experience was different from others. Originally, she had experienced reincarnation and recultivation. Now in this Tao development world, she had experienced it again. Therefore, she could rely on her nature and wisdom to develop such a great path when she sensed the great path of the Tao development world. For example, every time her cultivation broke through a realm, even if there was a deviation from the developed great path, she could adjust and correct it in this realm. This was completely different from Lin Sun's great path. At least, when he recultivated, he still needed to improve his realm step by step and use the power of this realm to comprehend the heavenly Tao of the Tao development world, so as to develop a higher level of great path. But there was no doubt that these 2 ways led to the same goal. Are you ready? Seeing that Summer Solstice had woken up, Lin Sun asked with a smile. Summer Solstice nodded. Then let's leave this world today, said Lin Sun as he looked at the Tao Development Divine Tablet at the side. You first. Summer Solstice went straight forward and pressed her hand on the Tao Development Divine Tablet. Boom! The Tao Development Divine Tablet roared, resonating with Summer Solstice's great path, and a surging and obscure chaotic aura emerged. That was the power that belonged to the chaotic Tao fruit. After 10 minutes, a gate of heaven appeared in the void. Immediately after, a ray of light flashed out of Summer Solstice's cleansing Rue and disappeared into the gate of heaven. Cleansing Rue's body went limp and she fainted on the ground. Lin Sun knew that Summer Solstice had obtained the chaotic Tao fruit and left this world. Without delay, he went straight forward and pressed his hand on the Tao Development Divine Tablet. Boom! In an instant, Lin Sun felt as if he'd entered into an expanse of the quintessence of chaos. Countless supreme paths towards the Tao were like a rain of divine rainbows that whistled and flickered within the quintessence of chaos, and they were suffused with a completely different aura. It wasn't a great path, but a great path that belonged to every kind of life, and it could lead directly to the eternal realm. Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked by this scene. Sure enough, it's just as I'd guessed. No matter if all living beings are lowly, strong, or weak, all of them have a path to attaining eternity. In the end, only those whose spirits and mental states remain intact would have the chance to step foot onto this path. At the same time, a strand of chaotic origin energy was absorbed by Lin Sun, giving him a sense of perfection as if he had arrived at the peak of the eternal realm. Looking around, nothing could surpass him. Finally, I've reached the great perfection of the boundless realm. An indescribable satisfaction surged in Lin Sun's heart. It was a kind of great freedom and unfettered aura. Plop! Qingfeng fell to the ground and fell into a coma. After a long time, Cleansing Rue was the first to wake up. She was stunned at first, and then she recalled everything she had experienced in the past 2 years, and her expression changed constantly. In the end, she suddenly let out a long breath, stood up, and bowed to the Tao Development Divine Tablet. Senior, you've enlightened me like a teacher. In the future, I'll live up to my teacher's expectations. Cleansing Rue's state of mind was clear and calm. In the past, she was just a country girl with a humble identity and shallow knowledge. But now she was an existence in the great perfection of the transcendent realm on the immortal way. Her heart and mind were no longer comparable to before. Before long, Qin Feng also woke up from his coma. Like Cleansing Rue, he was in a daze for a long time and understood everything he had experienced in the past 2 years. Thank you for your grace of rebirth. Qin Feng got up and bowed to the Tao Development Divine Tablet like Cleansing Rue. In the mysterious God realm, the 7 destined messengers of the Gen tribe have all met with misfortune. The delicate and charming Qin duck of the Gen tribe, dressed in a long black dress, said in a low voice with a haze between his eyebrows. Pei Tu of the Gon tribe, Qin Yangzi of the Kuan tribe, Kuhi of the Sun tribe, Tianshu of the Zhen tribe, and Wei Yun of the Kan tribe were all worried. Failed again. Why is Lin Sun so difficult to deal with? Pei Tu let out a long sigh. Over the years, as Lin Sun broke through the gates of heaven, he brought them bad news and blows again and again. Now, the state of mind of the 9 destined path lords had changed greatly. None of them dared to underestimate Lin Sun anymore. It was completely different from the disdain they had for Lin Sun in the past. The core forces of the 9 tribes of absolute beginning are now gathered in the bound of universe. In other words, if we want to deal with Lin Sun in the spirit's realm, the bound of universe is the last chance. Qin Yangzi said in a low voice. Each of the 9 divisions of the absolute beginning sect had an extremely powerful envoy of heaven who presided over the Xianhuang world. Every single one of them had a cultivation that was almost on par with the boundless Tao Lord. Kuhi said in a low voice, the bound of universe. That place is about the control of the origin of universe. If we seize the opportunity, we might have a chance to kill Lin Sun. Opportunity? Tianshu said with a wry smile, to tell you the truth, I don't dare to hope to kill Lin Sun anymore. The others were also silent. Indeed, after going through so many setbacks, they did not have much confidence in their hearts. They did not dare to ascertain if the powers within the Xianhuang world could take down Lin Sun. No matter what, Lin Sun has entered the bound of universe. Even if we can't take him down in the end, we can't let him pass so easily, Pei Tu said through gritted teeth. His eyes were full of madness, like a desperate gambler. The bound of universe. Under a strong tree. Du So was drinking wildly, looking a little anxious. Opposite him, the old priest shook his head helplessly. We have waited for so many years. Why are you still so impatient? The forces of the 9 tribes of Taichu are scattered everywhere in the 9 realms of the realm of God. If that kid Lin Sun wants to kill his way here, he'll probably have to go through countless dangers. How can I not be anxious? Du So said grumpily. The old priest was silent for a while and said, those old guys in the profound God realm are also waiting. This is enough to prove that Lin Sun is safe. Being safe doesn't mean he can reach the bound of universe smoothly. Du So snorted coldly. Ha ha. The old priest laughed, speaking of which, I think of the divination I made for Lin Sun a long time ago in Xiao Empire. The path ahead was filled with fog, and the path back was a scene of destruction that seemed like the heavens were collapsing and the earth was collapsing. Now it seems that it has come true one by one. Look at his cultivation path. It is almost full of turbulence, chaos, and blood, which has caused many changes. Du So was stunned. Do you think that boy is a jinx? No, there can be no construction without destruction. This is an unprecedented change. The old priest shook his head and said, Golden Cicada saw it, so did Putti. I believe supreme existences like Qin, Shi, and Absolute Beginning have also seen it. I'm just curious what kind of changes he will cause when he reaches the profound God realm. Chapter 3298. Do So was stunned. After a while, he rolled his eyes and said, "What's the point of talking about the future?" The old priest said, "Because I firmly believe that Lin Sun can not only enter the bound of universe, but also cross the path of slashing and reach the realm of gods." Do So was silent for a while and said, "If Lin Sun has a chance to enter the bound of universe, I will fight for a chance to leave this world even at the cost of my life." The old priest said, "In the end, you are afraid of the 9 opponents of the 9 tribes of Taichu. There were only 11 of them in the bound of universe. He and Do So were 2 of them, while the other 9 were the 9 messengers of the 9 tribes of Taichu. There was a huge gap in numbers. In terms of strength, the 2 of them were at the same level as the 9 opponents. There might be a slight gap, but it was completely negligible. Over the years, the 2 of them had had many conflicts and fights with each other. Although they could not resist each other's siege, it was not difficult for them to escape with their lives. It's not that I am afraid, but I know that as long as Lin Sun comes, the 9 old bastards will definitely attack Lin Sun at all costs." Do So said, "In the bound of universe, the competition is about the control of the origin of universe. Whoever condenses more origin of universe will have the upper hand in the competition. This also means that even if Lin Sun has the combat power of the infinite Tao Lord when he arrives in this world, it is impossible for him to fight against those enemies." The old priest said, "Therefore, we must find Lin Sun as soon as he arrives. Only when the 2 of us protect him with all our strength can we give him enough time to comprehend and control the power of black-yellow origin. Alas, the problem now is that no one knows when he will appear." Do So curled his lips helplessly. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distant sky. He was tall and thin, wearing a blue robe with a white jade belt around his waist. His eyes were as frightening as the sun and the moon. "Xidigarba." The old priest narrowed his eyes. This was the messenger of destiny of the Kuan tribe, an extremely powerful existence. Soon after, in other directions, more figures appeared one after another. Some stepped on auspicious clouds, their bodies reflecting the sky. Some used wind and thunder, their bodies surging with infinite light. Some carried Taoist swords on their backs, countless sword diagrams emerging as they walked. Some, a total of 6 people, were walking toward them from different directions. Rumble, the sky was dark and the void was in disorder. A boundless and terrifying aura spread out from the 6 figures, as if 6 supreme rulers had appeared. After being silent for nearly 100 years, these old bastards actually suddenly attacked today. Why do I feel that something is wrong? Do So frowned. He and the old priest were very familiar with these 6 people. They were Du Tianyuan of the Qian tribe, Xidigarba of the Kuan tribe, Zhong Su of the Sun tribe, Ba Ju of the Zhen tribe, Yun Zhou of the Zhen tribe, and Fei Ye of the Dui tribe. Every one of them was only a step away from the boundless Tao Master. It was because they had fought against each other many times in the past that the Du So and the old priest did not panic when they saw them. They just felt it was strange. Lin Sun is very likely to come. The old priest's eyes lit up, and they are here to besiege us and prevent us from supporting Lin Sun. Do So was shocked. You go first. I'll hold them back. The old priest took a deep breath. Remember, you must find Lin Sun as soon as possible. We can't let him be caught by those enemies. Boom. He rose into the air and his skinny figure shone brightly. A vast starry sky and hundreds of millions of stars appeared around him. Surround them! In the distance, Xidigarba in a dark green robe shouted, and his voice resounded through the sky like thunder. He and the other 5 messengers of destiny moved together. They each activated their cultivation and besieged the Do So and the old priest. Rumble for a moment, wind and thunder surged and the sky collapsed. All kinds of horrible divine light rushed up, as if covering the sky and the sun. A great battle broke out. The old priest seemed extremely resolute at this moment. He was just one person, but he fought against 6 messengers of destiny head-on. He was completely reckless, but it was not difficult to find that if one looked carefully at the battle, whether it was the old priest or the 6 messengers of destiny, their figures seemed to have turned into a world of their own. Every single one of their worlds carried civilization, the grand Tao, all living beings, and all things. When looked at from afar, every single one of them was like a civilization of an era, and these civilizations were ceaselessly attacking and resisting each other. Those inconceivable scenes seemed to be especially shocking. This was the struggle of the bound of universe. The cultivators who entered this world could transform into a shapeless world after comprehending and condensing heaven and earth energy, and it was sufficient to carry the energy of a cultivation civilization. This sort of power was also called the Tao of heaven and earth. The more abundant the heaven and earth energy condensed, the stronger the heaven and earth Tao grasped. "Leave quickly," the old priest's voice resounded. Do So took a deep breath and shouted loudly. His figure transformed into a shapeless world, and he released the profundities of the heaven and earth Tao as he charged towards the distance. A few messengers of destiny tried to stop him, but Do So charged through them desperately, and he teleported towards the distance with all his might. However, even though he'd charged out of the encirclement, he couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood. The blow just now made him suffer a lot of injuries. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to escape so easily. "Zhongshu Baju, Fei Ye, you 3 go after Do So." Xidagarba's shout rang out on the battlefield. Immediately, Zhongshu and the other 2 moved through the void and chased after due south. Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and Cloud Traveling Boat besieged the old priest with all their strength. Boom, the battle became more and more intense. Although the old priest was in a dangerous situation, his state of mind had calmed down. He knew that Do So wouldn't let anything happen to Lin Sun even if he had to pay with his life. However, the only thing he wasn't sure about was whether Lin Sun had really arrived in the bound of universe. If this was a conspiracy of the enemy, then it would be too dangerous for him and Do So to risk their lives today. Do So was fleeing. He couldn't help but wonder where he was now if Lin Sun had come here. The bound of universe was so vast that it seemed to have no boundary. Do So had been traveling here for many years, but he still couldn't figure out where the boundary of the bound of universe was. Only Xidagarba and the other 5 showed up this time, but Xiao Yunzi, Emo Qing, and Zhong Rui didn't show up. It seems that these 3 have already noticed the movement of Lin Sun's entry into this world and started to take action in advance. Do So frowned. After a long time, he murmured in his heart, Lin Sun, you must be safe, Do So's pupils contracted as he noticed that Zhongshu Baju and Fei Ye had caught up with him from behind. He didn't dare to hesitate and rushed forward while gritting his teeth. In this vast world, Do So's figure was like a black flowing light. He flashed across thousands of mountains and rivers at an extremely fast speed. Behind him, Zhongshu, Baju, and Fei Ye were chasing closely. However, compared to Do So's anxiety and uneasiness, the 3 of them seemed very calm and composed. These 2 old guys are not slow to react. It seems that they have already guessed that Lin Sun is about to enter the bound of universe. Zhongshu chuckled. He carried an ancient sword on his back, and sword diagrams emerged under his feet. He looked elegant and unrestrained. It's a pity that when Lin Sun enters this world, the 2 of them are destined to be unable to help him. Baju's expression was indifferent. His body that was tall and sturdy like a mountain was surging with wind and lightning, emitting boundless fine light. Being targeted by us, they can only save their lives at most. How can they have the chance to help? Fei Ye chuckled. He looked old, but his voice was as clear as a young man's. His body was flowing with the phenomena of the heavens like tides, and his momentum was vast. We just got the news today. According to the analysis of the 9 Destiny Path Lords, Lin Sun should enter the bound of universe in the near future. Zhongshu muttered, but the news also said that even the 9 Destiny Path Lords don't know when Lin Sun will leave the Tao development world. Do you think that Lin Sun has already arrived in the bound of universe in advance, but we just don't know about it? Arrived in advance? Baju shook his head and said, that's impossible. If he arrived in advance, how could he not contact Du So and the old priest? Not contacting him in advance means that it's impossible for him to arrive in advance? That doesn't make sense. Zhongshu said, with Lin Sun's ability, he must have a deep understanding of the bound of universe before he came to this world. I'm afraid he also knows that if he wants to fight against us, he must comprehend and control the origin of universe as soon as possible. If he chooses to stay dormant after entering this world, it'll be extremely difficult for us to catch him. After a pause, he continued, that's why if we can capture Du So and the old priest, we can use them as hostages to threaten Lin Sun. No matter when he appears, he'll be threatened by us. If he has already appeared in the bound of universe, how can he remain indifferent when he finds out that we're chasing after Du So and the old priest? Zhongshu and Fei Yi nodded their heads. After all, the bound of universe was too big, and no one knew when he would appear. If they wanted to strike Lin Sun at the first possible moment, they naturally had to think of another way. Therefore, after receiving the news from the 9 Masters of Destiny, they directly took action. The key was not to kill Du So and the old priest, but to take this opportunity to deal with Lin Sun. Just like now, when the 6 of them were dealing with Du So and the old priest respectively, the other 3 Masters of Destiny were patrolling the bound of universe separately. They wanted to find Lin Sun as soon as possible and kill him. While talking, Zhongshu, Baju, and Fei Yi were not slow. They had been closely following Du So's trace without any slack. At the same time, in the depths of a quiet and uninhabited mountain in the bound of universe, there was an inconspicuous canyon. Tens of thousands of meters below the ground of the canyon, there was a cave residence. Outside the cave residence, there was a marvelous prohibition to conceal the breath. In the cave residence, a man and a woman were meditating. 3 consecutive updates first, and there's more in the evening. Chapter 3299. The man and the woman in the cave residence were Lin Sun. Half a month ago, they had already entered the Xian Huang world one after another. Just as his enemies had speculated, Lin Sun had long understood the matters of the bound of universe. He was also clear that before he could comprehend and control the source energy of the bound of universe, no matter how strong his combat power was, he would not have the ability to fight against those enemies. Therefore, the moment they arrived in this world, he and Xia Ji chose to cultivate. At this time, on Lin Sun's body, a mysterious scene of the Great Way emerged, as if it had turned into an invisible and boundless world. It carried the vast and brilliant civilization and countless great ways of the heavens. All kinds of phenomena and creatures were evolved in it, and endless vitality was surging and diffusing. The primal chaos was split open, and the heaven and earth were revealed. Profound practitioners were viewed as the color of the sky, and yellow practitioners were viewed as the color of the earth. Heaven and earth were also referred to as heaven and earth. But in the eyes of cultivators, Skyearth was the shapeless world from when the chaos had just been split open, and it possessed the energy to bear civilization, the grand Tao, vitality, and all living beings. Or perhaps it could be said that Skyearth could be called the heavens and the earth, yet it represented all worlds, all universes, and all worlds that were tangible and intangible. It was as small as the world of a grain of sand or a rock, and it was as large as the world of the universe. Everything could be taken as Skyearth. On the other hand, after one comprehended the Skyearth quintessence, the grand Tao grasped by a cultivator would be able to evolve to the state at the beginning of the chaos, and from there, it would allow one's grand Tao to realize a miraculous transformation. This was not a breakthrough in cultivation, but a transformation of one's own great Tao. Simply speaking, comprehending the heaven and earth source in this bound of universe would allow one to condense heaven and earth chi within one's own grand Tao, and one's own body would be able to transform into the heavens and the earth, carrying civilization and the grand Tao. When he accomplished this, it was simply no different than transforming into an era. In this half a month's time, Lin Sun had already easily comprehended and controlled the mysterious yellow origin, and the power of the Great Way in his body was undergoing a slow but amazing transformation. For example, if one were to fight within the Xianhuang world, they would be competing to see who could cultivate the Xianhuang qi more intensely, and who would be able to gain the upper hand in the battle. In other words, this was actually a competition for the Grand Tao in another sense. However, what they were competing in was their own great Tao's control over the mysterious yellow origin power. Since ancient times until now, there had always been a saying that any cultivator who was able to leave the Xianhuang realm would practically all be able to attain the level of the Great Circle of the Boundless Realm. The reason was that condensed sky-earth chi was a critical factor that prompted a cultivator's path towards the Tao to transform. In order to leave the bound of universe aura that one condensed must be able to resonate with the origin of chaos of the bound of universe. Only then could it attract the chaos Tao fruit and enter the heavenly gate. From this, it could be inferred that when cultivators condensed sky-earth chi that was sufficient to draw the resonance of the heavens and the earth, they would already possess the critical factor to allow their cultivation to attain the perfection stage of the boundless realm. But it was totally different for Lin Sun. The reason was very simple. When he was in the Tao evolution world, Lin Sun had already attained the level of grand completion boundless realm. It was precisely because of this that when he entered the Xianhuang world, it was effortless for him to comprehend and control the Xianhuang origin. He could feel the essence of the Xianhuang origin with ease and control it. Even when he was condensing the sky-earth energy, it showed signs of advancing by leaps and bounds, and it allowed him to temper his grand Tao to 50% in a short period of half a month. The Xianhuang origin can bear the civilization and Great Way, so that the cultivator can transform himself into the world, and then he can also bear the civilization and Great Way. This is equivalent to transforming himself into an era. While cultivating and meditating, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The Xianhuang origin was indeed wonderful. On one side, the power of the Xianhuang origin was also surging in Xia Zhi's body. Different from Lin Sun's, the world she transformed into was as dark as the eternal night, and the civilization and Great Way it carried were like stars adorning the dark world of the eternal night, mysterious and deep. Time flew, and a few days passed in a hurry. Lin Sun, who was cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes. The restrictive power outside the cave residence produced a layer of ripple-like fluctuations, which was noticed by him at the first time. There is a cultivator passing through these mountains. Thinking of this, Lin Sun got up and poured his divine awareness into the restrictive power. Suddenly, a scene appeared in the vast mountains. A figure flashed across the sky like a ray of light. Following that, 3 more figures appeared, and they chased after the figure in front of them relentlessly. Do so. Although the scene disappeared in an instant, Lin Sun still recognized that the figure being chased was Do So. All of a sudden, his eyes were filled with a frightening cold light. As early as when he was in the mortal realm, Xing Jian Gorge had told Lin Sun that his master, Yuan Chu, had sent a message to Lin Sun, telling him to find Do So when he entered the bound of universe. In this way, he could get Do So's protection. However, because Lin Sun had already known about the bound of universe, he planned to find Do So after comprehending and controlling the power of the Xianhuang origin after entering this world. But who would have thought that Do So was being chased? Xia Zhi, concentrate on your cultivation here. I'll go out for a while. Lin Sun took a deep breath and made a decision. Okay. Xie Ji, who was cultivating, responded. Without any delay, Lin Sun went straight out of the underground cave residence, and then moved to the sky. Swoosh! He used all his strength, and his speed had reached an astonishing level. His whole body was like a wisp of shadow. Every time he took a step, it was as if the stars were moving, leaving endless mountains and rivers behind him. Huff huff Du So panted heavily as he fled, and his face darkened. He had been chased for 4 days. He had passed countless mountains and rivers, but he had not been able to get rid of the 3 heavenly destined messengers. Now, Du So had figured out the reason why the enemies were chasing him. Obviously, they wanted to capture him and use him as a hostage to threaten Lin Sun. This made Du So feel angry, but at the same time, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Although he was a little embarrassed from being chased, at least it proved that Lin Sun had not come to the bound of universe yet. Or he had already arrived at the bound of universe and had not been discovered by the enemies. For Du So, this was enough. I have to find a way to get rid of these enemies. Du So frowned. He was in a bad situation. He had been running for 4 days, and it had consumed a lot of his cultivation. If this went on, he would not be able to hold on for long. However, Du So knew that if he was in a bad situation, the 3 enemies who had been chasing him would be in a bad situation as well. After all, he had been running for 4 days, and they had been chasing him for 4 days. Old man, you can't escape. Zhong Su's voice came from behind, and it was filled with cold hatred. Stop talking nonsense. Catch up first. Du So rolled his eyes. In these 4 days, he had been ridiculed, mocked, and threatened countless times. Now that he heard such a threat again, he felt it was ridiculous. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared out of thin air in the distance. The figure held a silver spear in his hand, and his figure was tall like a peerless war god. Along with his appearance, a shapeless power of heaven and earth surged out and transformed into a world. Within it, the aura of the Grand Tao surged out, and it was extremely magnificent. This person seemed to have been waiting for a long time, and he appeared out of thin air in front of Du So, who was running with all his might, had just stopped and intended to dodge when the world formed by the power of heaven and earth enveloped him. Boom! Heaven and earth rumbled, and everything trembled. Even though Du So's reaction was extremely fast, and he unleashed his power of heaven and earth, he still staggered from the impact, and he couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Yunzi! His expression changed as he recognized the man with the silver spear. He was one of the 9 heavenly mandate envoys, Xiao Yunzi. This made Du So's heart sink. He had been running with all his might for 4 days, and now he suffered such a sudden attack. His condition seemed to have worsened. What was worse was that Zhong Su, Baju, and Fei Ye had arrived in time. Old man, I told you earlier that you can't escape. Zhong Su sneered. Before the 3 of them arrived, a vast world surged out from their bodies. It was formed by the heaven and earth energy, and it could carry the Grand Tao and civilization. In front of them, Xiao Yunzi attacked again. A pincer attack. Du So took a deep breath, and the aura on his body rumbled. A world covered the sky, and it revealed a boundless might. He decided to fight for a way out. In the past, he had fought with these heavenly mandate envoys many times, and he could escape unscathed every time. But it was different this time. He was in a terrible situation, and now he was besieged by 4 heavenly mandate envoys who were no weaker than him. His situation could be described as extremely dangerous. Everyone, this is related to the action of dealing with Lin Sun. We can't let this old man escape this time. Zhong Su said in a deep voice. As he spoke, the battle had completely broken out. In this mountain and river, there seemed to be many era worlds fighting, and endless dazzling light rain was set off. Du So tried many times to break out of the siege, but he was blocked every time. Moreover, he was injured and covered with blood. The world of Great Way he manifested was also violently tumbling. It was completely suppressed by Zhong-Su and was about to collapse. Do I really have to die here this time? Du-So wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and he couldn't help but feel a little desperate. Immediately there was madness in his eyes. Even if I die, I will drag someone down with me, he roared and threw caution to the wind. Seeing this, Xiao Yunzi, Zhong-Su, Baju, and Feiya couldn't help but sneer. It was too late to go all out now. In the final analysis, Du-So had consumed a lot of his cultivation during the 4 days of escape. Moreover, he was unexpectedly injured by Xiao Yunzi. In the eyes of his enemies, even if he went all out, it would be no different from a moth flying into a flame. But at this moment, Xiao Yunzi and the others were stiff all over. They felt a fatal danger approaching, which made them change their expressions and dodge subconsciously. Swish! At the moment when they were far away, a tall figure appeared out of thin air in front of Du-So, who was about to go all out. There was one more chapter before 11 p.m. Chapter 3300. Lin Sun's tall figure stood in the void calmly. At that moment, Du-So almost threw a desperate blow at Lin Sun. Even if he managed to restrain himself, his old face had already turned red, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Why didn't you say anything when you came? Du-So couldn't help coughing up blood, but his face was full of excitement. Lin Sun was here. How could he not be happy? But in a moment, his smile froze and his heart sank to the bottom. He quickly transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. Why are you so stupid? You know the situation, but you still want to get involved. Run. I'll hold them back even if I have to risk my life. Hurry up. In the end, Du-So's voice was filled with anxiety. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing and patted Du-So's shoulder. Don't worry about me. Just watch from the side. Du-So was stunned. In the distance, Zhongshu's surprised voice sounded. I was wondering who it was. It's you. Baju, Feiya and Xiao Yunzi were also surprised and delighted. Previously, they had sensed danger and avoided it. But when they saw Lin Sun's figure clearly, they were all excited. It seems that you've been waiting for me for a long time. Lin Sun looked over, and his eyes also became indifferent and cold. Of course. Zhongshu pointed at Du-So and said with a smile, do you know why we want to deal with this old guy? It's to force you to show your trace. Even if you hide and don't come out, as long as we capture this old guy, he will be a hostage enough to threaten you. Du-So's face changed constantly and he shouted, shameless. But no one paid attention to him. All eyes were fixed on Lin Sun. Feiya suddenly asked, Lin Sun, when did you come to the Bound of Universe? Lin Sun glanced at him and said, including today, it's exactly half a month. Feiya seemed to be much more relaxed and said, so, you've already begun to comprehend the power of the origin of universe? Everyone fixed their eyes on Lin Sun. Du-So was about to say something, but was stopped by Lin Sun. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and said, why don't you give it a try? He appeared to be very calm and collected. This made Zhongshu and the others frown slightly. They didn't know whether Lin Sun was bluffing or he was confident. What a joke. Even if you came half a year earlier, the amount of power of heaven and earth that you could comprehend and control would not be that strong. Zhong-Su's voice was cold. As he spoke, an invisible world emerged from his body with a bang. It was filled with surging chi of heaven and earth, which evolved into a vast and beautiful civilization and the power of the Great Way and pressed down on Lin Sun fiercely. He and the other heavenly mandate envoys had cultivated here for many years, and the power of heaven and earth that they had refined was extremely rich and powerful. In contrast, he did not believe that Lin Sun, who had just arrived in the Bound of Universe, could comprehend and master much of the origin of black-yellow. Boom! A world soared through the sky and crushed down. How terrifying was such a scene! It caused the mountains and rivers to collapse while space exploded into pieces. Let me! Du So was the first to step forward. But his figure was caught by Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun waved his left hand casually. The world of heaven and earth formed by Zhongshu vanished completely in front of Lin Sun like a piece of paper. Du So was dumbfounded. He had planned to struggle when he was caught by Lin Sun, but at this moment, he was stunned and forgot to struggle. Even Zhongshu and the other heavenly mandate envoys changed their expressions slightly. "You've cultivated in this world for so long, and this is all you've got?" Lin Sun sneered, and his eyebrows were full of disdain. "Humph!" Zhongshu's face darkened, and he took a deep breath. Boom! Billions of rays of light rose from his tall figure and condensed into a world of heaven and earth. Its power was much stronger than before. Accompanied by a clear and melodious sword cry, the Taoist sword on Zhongshu's back swept out. In a flash, the world of heaven and earth merged into his Taoist sword, causing the Taoist sword to burst out with a terrifying aura. Slash! With a loud shout, the Taoist sword soared into the sky and slashed down. Looking from a distance, the Taoist sword seemed to be infinitely tall, and it carried a vast world with the aura of civilization and the Great Way. This sword seemed to be formed by an era, but Lin Sun didn't even look at it. He suddenly slapped out his palm. Bang! The Taoist sword seemed to be hit by an ancient divine mountain. It shook violently, and the world, civilization, and Great Way contained in the Taoist sword burst like bubbles and collapsed. In the end, the Taoist sword let out a whine and was slapped away by the power of Lin Sun's palm. Puff! The figure of Zhongshu staggered and coughed up blood. His face was full of horror. A palm, a sword that broke Zhongshu's power. The scene caused everyone's bodies to stiffen and their expressions to change drastically. How is this possible? How can he master such a strong power of heaven and earth when he just arrived in this world? Feiyu was shocked and angry. He could see that the power of Lin Sun's palm seemed to be understated, but it was full of the power of heaven and earth. It contained an invisible realm that carried the power of Lin Sun's Great Way. But he didn't expect that such a palm could defeat Zhongshu's sword with irresistible force. It should be known that Zhongshu had been immersed in the bound of heaven and earth for more than 10,000 years. No one knew how much power of heaven and earth he had refined. In contrast, Lin Sun had obviously just arrived in the bound of heaven and earth not long ago, but he could do this. How could people not be surprised and surprised? At this moment, even Du So was stunned. He looked Lin Sun up and down as if he was getting to know Lin Sun again. "Who else wants to try?" Lin Sun asked. He was calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. The reason why he wasn't in a hurry to make a move was that he wanted to have a try to see how far he had comprehended and mastered the way of heaven and earth. "Arrogant!" Xiao Yunzi snorted coldly and waved the silver spear in his hand. Boom! The spear flew across the sky, and the image of an era appeared. It was dazzling, as if an era was coming. Vaguely, the sound of various great ways resounded, adding a shocking momentum. Unlike Zhongshu, Xiao Yunzi's combat power was at its peak. At this moment, when he made a move, the momentum was beyond imagination. At this moment, Lin Sun finally looked serious. This blow made him feel some pressure. But it was just a little bit of pressure. Clang! Lin Sun stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the abyssal sword swept out. Then Lin Sun gathered all the power of the way of heaven and earth in his sword and slashed across the sky. Boom! The heavens and the earth were instantly filled by a strand of sword will that shot into the sky. The majestic sword will was boundless and boundless, and it contained countless grand daos and countless civilizations. If Xiao Yunzi's blow contained the power of an era, then Lin Sun's blow seemed to contain the power of many eras. Then, Lin Sun's blow seemed to contain the power of many eras. Boom! In the earth-shattering collision, endless light rained down. The silver spear was cut into two and flew out. Xiao Yunzi's figure was split into two. Fortunately, He reacted quickly and his spirit escaped first, so he could avoid the possibility of being obliterated. But even so, that shocking scene still caused the hairs of everyone present to stand on end, and their souls almost left their bodies. Xiao Yunzi, who was at the peak of his cultivation, couldn't make a move. He was seriously injured by the sword and only his spirit was left. Lin Sun frowned slightly. I didn't manage to kill him with one strike. It seems that I haven't refined enough power of heaven and earth. This shocked Du So, and he felt like he was in a mess. This was still not enough? Go. At this moment, Zhongshu and the rest realized that something was wrong. They turned around and fled. Initially, when they saw Lin Sun, they were surprised and excited. They thought that they could easily take down Lin Sun if they seized the perfect opportunity. After all, they had cultivated in this world for many years and had refined enough power of heaven and earth. But at this moment, they were panic-stricken. There was only one thought in their mind: run. Run as far away as possible. If you want to leave, you have to let me send you off. As Lin Sun spoke, his figure suddenly glowed. Boom! A world formed by the power of heaven and earth appeared and instantly covered the endless mountains and rivers. The power of civilization and great ways surged in it and completely enveloped the void in all directions. As for Zhongshu and the rest, they only felt their vision darken. Their figures were suppressed uncontrollably into the world of heaven and earth that Lin Sun had formed. Compared to this vast world, their figures were as small as ants. They couldn't struggle at all. It was also at this moment that they deeply realized how terrifying the power of heaven and earth that Lin Sun had mastered was. It had long surpassed theirs. It was a pity that they now understood that it was all over. In the next moment, they felt a sharp pain in their consciousness and lost all their senses. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun kept his cultivation and said disappointedly, I thought that these old fellows would be very powerful. It turns out that they are only SOSO beside him. Du So's expression stiffened. He was shocked and speechless. If they had known that this lad had become so powerful, they wouldn't have been so worried. Why did they have to risk their lives? Senior, how are your injuries? Lin Sun asked with concern. Du So woke up from his chaotic thoughts. He shook his head and said, My injuries are not serious. I just don't understand. Did you really come here half a month ago? Lin Sun said, Of course. But how did you master such a powerful way of heaven and earth? Du So couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun asked in reply, Is this considered powerful? He clearly knew that he had only refined about 50% of the power of heaven and earth in his great ways. He was far from truly refining it to perfection. Looking at Lin Sun's puzzled expression, Du So's lips twitched violently. This lad probably didn't know how powerful his current combat power was. By the way, I remember that the old priest is also in this world, right? Lin Sun asked, Where is he now? Du So's expression changed at the mention of the old priest. He said, Quick, let's go find that old fellow. I'm worried that he might be in trouble. The 5th chapter was delivered. Let's talk about something important. If there were no accidents, the book would be finished by the end of the month. After the book was finished, Goldfish would consider writing some extra articles about the talents on the public account to fill in the small holes left unfilled in the previous period. For those who didn't follow the public account, just open it. You could see the new articles as soon as possible. Chapter 3301. Whoosh, whoosh. Carrying Lin Sun, Du So teleported with all his might in the void. He was already severely injured and had consumed a great deal of his strength, but he couldn't care about that right now. Fortunately, Lin Sun was there to take him with him, otherwise he would not have much strength to run around at all. Along the way, Lin Sun learned that Du So and the old priest had been staying in the Bound of Universe all these years. It wasn't that they didn't want to leave, but the chi they refined couldn't resonate with the heaven and earth of this world. The 9 heavens mandate envoys of the 9 tribes of absolute beginning were the same. At the end of the day, there were only a handful of people who had managed to pass through the 9 heavens of the myriad spirits' God realm. On the other hand, Do So also found out what Lin Sun had experienced after entering the ruins of Tao. Especially when he found out that Lin Sun had already attained the perfection stage of the boundless realm in the Tao evolution world, Do So vaguely understood why Lin Sun had grasped the way of heaven and earth so powerful in just half a month after arriving in the bound of heaven and earth. In the final analysis, it was because Lin Sun's cultivation had long surpassed the level of infinite Tao Lord and he had become the real infinite dominator. What was the boundless ruler? Attaining the ultimate perfection of the boundless realm, stepping onto the end of the eternal Tao path. On the other hand, only Golden Cicada, the core master, Chun Linkong, Heya, and the ape ancestor were known to have stepped foot into this realm in the ruins of profound Tao. As for the boundless Tao Lord, he was the existence that was closest to perfection. The 9 destiny path lords of the 9 divisions of absolute beginning and the founding ancestors of the 4 ancestral halls were also at this level. They were also extremely rare. However, compared to the boundless hegemon, he was still on a lower level. Now that Lin Sun was the boundless dominator, he had undoubtedly surpassed the patriarchs of the 4 great ancestral halls and the master of destiny path of the 9 divisions of the Taichu clan. Do So could not help but be shocked when he realized this. As far as he knew, Lin Sun had only cultivated for more than 1,000 years. It was also at this time that Do So felt that it was reasonable for Lin Sun to suppress Zhongshu and the other 3. After all, the current Lin Sun was a boundless sovereign. With Lin Sun's help, who in the bound of universe could be his enemy? I can only hope that nothing will happen to the old priest, Do So murmured to himself. 4 hours later, Do So's figure appeared in the midst of a collapsed and withered mountain and river. His expression was extremely ugly. This was originally the place where he and the old priest resided. A few days ago, the old priest had also fought intensely with Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and the cloud-traversing boat here. But now the old priest was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the traces of battle here, they went in this direction. Lin Sun looked at the nearby mountains and rivers for a moment and then looked into the distance. Do So took a deep breath and suppressed the bad premonition in his heart, intending to continue the search with Lin. Suddenly, a series of ripples appeared in the distant void. Following that, Xidagarba, Do Tianyuan, and cloud-traversing boat appeared out of thin air, and there were 2 more people beside them. One was a black-haired, black-clothed man with a saber on his back, and the other was a beautiful woman with gray hair that fell to her waist. The former was called Shan Tu, and the latter was called Lu Yao. They were both envoys of Heaven's mandate. I didn't expect you to bring Lin Sun here, due south. When they saw Lin Sun standing side by side with Do So, Xidagarba and others were surprised, and then their eyes lit up as if they were staring at the long-awaited prey. Why are Zhongshu and others missing? Some people frowned and noticed that something was wrong. As soon as these words came out, all the destined messengers present frowned. Where's the old priest? What did you do to him? Do So asked with a livid face. He's not dead, but he's imprisoned by us. Xidagarba, dressed in a pale cyan robe, said indifferently. Hand over the old priest, and I'll give Zhongshu back to you. Lin Sun suddenly said and reached out his hand to pick up a figure. It was Zhongshu who had been suppressed. Seeing this, Xidagarba and others' faces darkened. Originally, they caught the old priest to threaten Lin Sun, but now Lin Sun also caught Zhongshu, which meant that they were in the same situation. Where are the others except Zhongshu? Xidagarba took a deep breath and asked. You don't need to know this. Just ask me, will you let them go or not? Lin Sun said indifferently. Xidagarba and others looked at each other. It was obvious that they were talking about something by voice transmission. After a while, Xidagarba sighed with a touch of pity on his face. Brother Zhongshu, I'm sorry. In order to capture Lin Sun, we have to do this. This was tantamount to deciding to abandon Zhongshu. Fortunately, Zhongshu was in a coma at the moment. If he saw this scene, no one knew what he would think. Lin Sun, the old priest's life is in our hands. Next, it's up to you to make a choice. If you want him to live, you'd better surrender. If you don't want him to live, we'll kill him immediately. Ksitigarbha said coldly. He no longer took Zhongshu seriously. Whether the old priest is dead or alive, you should at least let me have a look at him, right? Lin Sun said. Okay. As Ksitigarbha said, he raised his hand and picked up the old priest. His figure was broken, stained with blood, and he was unconscious. Seeing this, Du So's eyes were bloodshot. He had the best relationship with the old priest. Seeing the miserable situation of the old priest, he felt a pain in his heart. Now, it's time for you to make a choice. Ksitigarbha looked cold. I'll exchange the 4 of them for the old priest. If you don't agree, you can kill the old priest. But I can guarantee that you will all beg for death. Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the suppressed figures of Fei Ye, Xiao Yunzi, and Ba Ju also emerged. Seeing this, Ksitigarbha and the others all changed their faces. They thought that only Zhongshu was captured by Lin Sun, so after discussion, they decided to give up Zhongshu in exchange for a chance to threaten Lin Sun. But who would have thought that Lin Sun suppressed all 4 of their companions? It was a little hard for them to believe. How could a young man who had just arrived in the bound of universe do this? And Du So was doomed to be unable to do this. Lin Sun said again, my patience is limited. I need a reply after 3 breaths. The atmosphere also became extremely depressing at this moment. Ksitigarbha and the other 4 looked uncertain, and they all looked like they wanted to eat Lin Sun. Until the time of 3 breaths was almost up, Ksitigarbha gritted his teeth and said, we can agree to exchange, but there is a condition. Lin Sun interrupted him directly, either exchange or fight directly. Don't even think about making any more conditions. He seemed extremely powerful. Du So gritted his teeth. He also knew that Lin Sun's approach was the wisest in the current situation. In any case, he couldn't be controlled by others, even if he had to sacrifice the old priest. Ksitigarbha and the others' faces became more and more gloomy. Lin Sun's strength was far beyond their expectations. Okay, exchange. Ksitigarbha's voice was squeezed out from his teeth. After you and I leave the hostages here, retreat to the distance and let them return on their own. Lin Sun said without thinking. As he said, he threw Zhongshu and the other 3 to the ground and lifted the imprisonment force on them, letting them wake up one by one. Seeing this, Ksitigarbha also threw the old priest to the ground. Seeing the old priest wake up, Lin Sun said, now let's all retreat and let them return to their camps on their own. Retreat. With a livid face, Ksitigarbha waved his hand and ordered everyone to retreat. Immediately, Lin Sun and Du So also retreated. At this time, Zhongshu and the old priest had already understood the situation in front of them. Although they were excited, they also knew that there must be no trouble at this time. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. Immediately, the old priest and Zhongshu all took action. Lin Sun, Ksitigarbha and the others confronted each other in the distance, waiting. When the old priest approached, Zhongshu and the others also came to Ksitigarbha's side. No accident happened. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun brought the old priest to his side, and Ksitigarbha and the others also saved Zhongshu and the others. There were no hostages in their hands, and the originally oppressive atmosphere was also broken at this moment. Lin Sun, you all deserve to die. Ksitigarbha shouted, and his chi rose to the sky crazily. His anger was burning. The others around him also stopped holding back. One by one, their chi soared to the sky, and they did not hide their killing intent. However, when they were about to take action, Zhongshu shouted anxiously, run, run. Lin Sun is not our opponent at all. Xidigarba and the others were stunned and caught off guard. They did not expect that it was Zhongshu who stopped them. Run! Then, Fei Ye, Xiao Yunzi and Baju also shouted, their faces full of anxiety. This made Xidigarba and the others tremble inexplicably, and they realized that something was wrong. If it was only Zhongshu who said that, they would not feel anything. However, when the four of them stopped him together, there was a problem. Could it be that Lin Sun suppressed all of you previously? Xidigarba's expression changed suddenly. They had suspected it before, but they did not dare to believe it. But now, all of this seemed to be proving their suspicions true. Zhongshu and the others nodded repeatedly. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun, who was in the distance, said coldly, "In this bound of universe, even if you want to escape, where can you escape to?" His voice was still echoing, and he had already stepped into the air. Boom! At this moment, Lin Sun completely exploded. His cultivation was controlled by the power of universe, and it turned into an invisible world, covering the endless mountains and rivers in an instant. In the bound of universe, various civilizations appeared, and countless great ways emerged. It was vast and boundless, as if many epochs had gathered together and descended into this world. That scene also made Xidigarba and the others' scalps numb, and their faces changed in horror. What a terrifying power of universe! They finally understood why Zhongshu and the others were so anxious to stop them from taking action. At this extremely dangerous moment, Xidigarba and the others were greatly stimulated. They all ran their cultivation with all their might, and a terrifying bound of universe emerged from their bodies. They did not want to fight Lin Sun head-on, but to escape. Chapter 3302. A shocking scene unfolded before their eyes. In the void, the world of heaven and earth appeared one after another, extremely bright and vast. Each of them carried a civilization and various great ways, and all kinds of phenomena and spirits emerged. It was like the condensation of many epochs. This was the way of heaven and earth, condensing the chi of heaven and earth, thus promoting the transformation of one's own great way, deducing the supreme power of carrying civilization and great ways. Mastering such power was no different from being the master of an epoch. At this time, with the desperate efforts of the 5 messengers, the 5 world of heaven and earth released by them could be said to be extremely terrifying. As far as they were concerned, this strike was sufficient to open up a path for them to escape from this expanse of the heavens and the earth. Yes, it was only for the sake of escaping. But the next moment, boom! A world of heaven and earth shattered with a bang. It was like a vast world was withering away at this moment, and the civilization and the grand Tao it carried were falling apart and disintegrating. Puff! Cloud Traveler coughed up blood, as if he had been struck by lightning. This was his world of heaven and earth, the embodiment of his cultivation. But at this moment it was completely shattered and destroyed, causing his cultivation to be seriously damaged. How is this possible? Cloud Traveler looked up and saw the world of heaven and earth of heaven and earth of heaven. Do Tianyuan, Shan Tu, and Lu Yao also suffered a heavy blow at this moment. Boom! 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 Rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth resounded as one world of heaven and earth after another exploded like bubbles. A magnificent and resplendent rain of light rose up and swept out like a torrent. No one was a match for Lin Sun's world of heaven and earth. They were all shattered in one blow. That scene was like an epic being smashed by a heavy hammer. All of a sudden, Cloud Traveler was completely stunned. Looking at Xidigarba, Do Tianyuan and others, they all staggered and coughed up blood. They all suffered great injuries, and their aura was disordered and dispirited. Their faces were full of horror, and they screamed again and again. Their state of mind had been greatly impacted. With the power of one person, Lin Sun destroyed their world of heaven and earth in one blow. This was so horrible that it completely subverted their imagination. The old priest could not help but be stunned and gasp. He could not believe his eyes at all. Isn't it exciting? Looking at the dull look of the old priest, he thought of his stupid fuss when Lin Sun suppressed Zhongshu and others. I've already said that we were going to retreat. Why did you delay? Zhongsu, Baju, and the others had just escaped from death, but when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but feel despair. All of them looked as if they had lost their parents, and their hearts were like ashes. Boom! The smoke and clouds in the sky dissipated. Under the sky, Lin Sun stood alone, overlooking those heavily injured messengers of destiny and asked, "Do you want to try again?" Xitigarbha and others raised their heads with difficulty and looked at Lin Sun. Their pale faces were full of confusion and fear. No one could imagine how Lin Sun, who had just arrived in the bound of universe, could master such a terrifying way of universe. Even though he had been defeated, his heart was filled with indescribable confusion. How could this be? Seeing that no one answered, Lin Sun felt dispirited. Well, let me send you off. Boom! The sky was full of light and turned into the bound of universe. At this moment, Xitigarbha and others had no strength to struggle at all. They could only watch themselves being swallowed up like tiny ants. So far, the 9 messengers of destiny in this world had all died. In the distance, Du So and the old priest were in a trance. They had fought with those messengers of destiny for many years. Every time, they almost had to flee in embarrassment, and they also encountered great danger many times. Naturally, they were all very clear about the strength of those messengers of destiny. But such a group of powerful beings was killed by Lin Sun in the blink of an eye, which made Du So and the old priest feel like they were in a dream. Suddenly, Lin Sun's voice sounded, "Seniors, you'd better recover quickly. Don't leave any hidden dangers." Du So and the old priest looked up and saw Lin Sun walking over in the air. Dressed in a white robe, Lin Sun was as handsome as when he was young. But in the eyes of Du So and the old priest, this young man was enough for them to look up to. In the mysterious God realm, Pei Tu, Qin Yangzi, Shu He, and the other lords of destiny remained silent. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely oppressive. It hasn't even been 5 years since Lin Sun entered the ruins of Dao, right? After a long time, Pei Tu muttered with a low voice. He has already passed through the 8th level of the door of heaven and seized the chaotic Dao fruit 8 times. If nothing unexpected happens, then it won't be long before he'll leave the bound of universe to traverse the path of severing. His voice revealed an indescribably complicated feeling. In the beginning, they didn't care about Lin Sun at all, and they took him to be prey that was at their mercy. Later on, as Lin Sun traversed those heaven realms over and over again, it caused them to be furious, shocked, vigilant, and they suffered blows over and over again. Up until now, every single one of their hearts felt cold. They were completely deterred by the might Lin Sun revealed. No matter how unwilling they were to accept it, they had no choice but to admit that Lin Sun wasn't inferior to them, the boundless Dao Lords, and he might even surpass them. The path of severing is to sever the Daos of the past, present, and future. I wonder if this path of severing that has a slim chance of survival can trap Lin Sun. Qin Yangzi let out a long sigh. They didn't have any confidence in their hearts, and they didn't have the arrogance and confidence they had in the past any longer. So, their brows knit together tightly while their hearts were heavy when they talked about Lin Sun. This was something that had never happened in the past. It's useless for us to speak about all of this now, and we're unable to interfere or obstruct Lin Sun's footsteps any longer. We can only wait here passively. Shu He's voice revealed a wisp of an indescribable sense of loss. The cruelest part is that if he has the chance to traverse the path of severing and arrive at the profound God domain, then we'll probably be unable to be a match for him even if we join forces. A strand of pessimism spread and fermented within these Destiny Dao Lords, and the expressions of every single one of them were extremely gloomy. This is the variable that the sect master was waiting for? I seem to understand why the young miss and sect master didn't make a clear stand since the beginning. They probably expected that a mere spirit's domain would be unable to obstruct Lin Sun's footstep. Tianshu muttered. We can only blame ourselves for not understanding the situation. We thought that mobilizing all our forces to obstruct and attack Lin Sun meant that we were working for the sect master and the young Mississippi. But in the end, we suffered heavy casualties. How ridiculous! Everyone's expressions were slightly unsightly, and different thoughts surged in their hearts. Yes, why hadn't the sect master and the young miss made a stand since Lin Sun appeared? Could it be that they had expected that Lin Sun's momentum was unstoppable? Or perhaps they wanted to watch coldly from the sidelines and see if this variable, Lin Sun, could reach the profound God domain? After a while, Pei Tu said in a low voice, The sect master's heart is as deep as the sea, and it's far from what we can speculate. It's enough for us to do what we should do. Right at this moment, Ape Ancestor's figure that was as tall as a mountain appeared out of thin air outside the hall, and his aged voice resounded. All of you, follow me. Pei Tu and the others stood up in unison and looked at each other in confusion. May I ask where we're going, Lord Ape Ancestor? Pei Tu cupped his hands and said. To the profound Tao platform to see if Lin Sun can traverse the path of severing and arrive at the profound God domain. As Ape Ancestor spoke, he had already turned around and rushed forward. Pei Tu and the others were shocked at first, and then they all showed excitement. Even Ape Ancestor couldn't sit still. Was he finally going to make a move? While thinking, they had already started to move and followed Ape Ancestor. Ape Ancestor is moving. In the hidden world, Golden Cicada sensed something and couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. It's a little hasty to make a move at this time. Ape Ancestor has been with Tai Chu for a long time, like a servant and a friend. His path towards the Tao fused the energies of clear and turbid, yin and yang, and the two polarities into one, and it developed the divine aura of Tai Chi that had attained perfection. The rarest part of it all was that his attainments in the Tao were completely cultivated bitterly by himself, and even absolute beginning didn't give him much help. Mountain Master Fongsuan said in a light voice, Fellow Taoist ought to be clearly aware that in the various epochs since the ancient times until now, there have been countless formidable figures that have cultivated the Tai Chi Tao. However, only the Ape Ancestor has attained the ultimate perfection realm in this Tao. Golden Cicada smiled and said, The Tao of Tai Chi is a combination of hardness and softness, carrying yin and yang, one movement and one stillness, all seeking perfection. Taoist friend, do you think that Ape Ancestor's action this time is prepared, and not a hasty move? It must be so, Master Fongsuan said. In other words, when Ape Ancestor makes a move, there will be changes, and these changes may be what Tai Chu wants to see. So, Taoist friend, you don't intend to make a move? Golden Cicada was startled. Master Fongsuan thought for a moment and answered, Let nature take its course. Grandfather, Ape Ancestor is moving. Is that old guy finally unable to hold back? In the primordial spirit world, Chun Linkong's eyes lit up. Even you know what he's doing, how can he not know the changes that will be caused by his actions? A clear voice came from the thatched hut, Don't be anxious. Everyone can see Ape Ancestor's actions. It doesn't matter whether he's doing it intentionally, planning to preemptively attack, or setting up a diversion. As long as Tai Chu doesn't make a move, this game is far from starting. Chun Linkong raised an eyebrow. Grandfather, you only have eyes for Tai Chu, but I'm worried about young friend Lin's situation. Why don't I go to the profound Tao platform as well? After a moment of silence, the voice from the thatched hut sounded again. You can go and have a look. Chun Linkong was overjoyed and turned to leave. He had long been thinking about making a move. Such a temperament is not comparable to Golden Cicada and Pewty, but it doesn't matter. Each has his own Tao, and each has his own temperament. Whether they are determined to make progress or calm as a mountain, They are different after all. In the thatched hut, the handsome figure was lost in thought. As for Lin Sun, although he hasn't tried to cut the Tao, his cultivation should be better than his master now. In this regard, Putti is worthy of being a man of great courage. Although he has paid a great price, it is enough to make him feel gratified and proud to have such a successor. Chapter 3303. In the chaotic world. Black Crow hesitated for a long time, but he couldn't help but ask, Sect Master, did you ask Ape Ancestor to act now? Deep underground, the absolute beginning ruler's voice sounded, Little Crow, how many variables do you think Ape Ancestor's action will cause? Black Crow pondered, the current situation in the profound God region will affect everything. Once Ape Ancestor moves, it will definitely attract the attention of Chun Shi, Golden Cicada, Subhuti, Chun Linkong, and the others. I just don't know if they will act now. If that's the case, Ape Ancestor will be in danger. Wrong. The Primordium Sovereign said, only when the Ape Ancestor makes a move will he be able to activate the entire chessboard. As for the Ape Ancestor, he'll be fine. This was all part of my plan. If those opponents don't make a move, then when Lin Sun reaches the profound God domain, he'll definitely be surrounded by the Ape Ancestor and his people. If they move, it will naturally be even better. Black Crow seemed to realize something and said excitedly, Sect Master, do you already have the power to escape? It depends on whether it's worth it for me to get out of trouble when Lin Sun arrives. The absolute ruler's voice carried a hint of secrecy. If it's not worth it, then my efforts will have been wasted. Black Crow's heart trembled. Could it be that Sect Master already had a plan? Let me ask you, in your opinion, between us and our opponents in the profound God domain, who is stronger and who is weaker? The absolute beginning ruler asked. From the looks of it, we are evenly matched. Black Crow said softly. The only one in the profound God region who could threaten the absolute beginning ruler was Chun Shi. Subhuti, Golden Cicada, and Chun Linkong were slightly weaker. After all, the four of them only had the cultivation of the boundless ruler. However, on their side, only Shi and Ape Ancestor had the cultivation of the boundless ruler. In this level, they were slightly inferior. But in Black Crow's opinion, just the Sect Master alone was enough to threaten all of them. Even if the Sect Master was trapped, it was enough to intimidate them. Otherwise, why hadn't Chun Shi and Subhuti made a move during these countless years? The reason was that they were extremely afraid of the Sect Master's existence. As for the boundless ruler's level, they had the 9 divisions of absolute beginning, the 2 founders of the Shaman cult and Zen cult. On the other hand, there were only the Origin Sect Patriarch and the Spirit Sect Patriarch. Of course, in He-Ya's eyes, figures at the level of the immeasurable Taolord didn't have the qualifications to participate in the competition between the experts of the profound God region. Evenly matched? The Primordium Sovereign couldn't help but laugh. There was an indescribable feeling in his voice, as if he was mocking himself, but also as if he felt that this was a joke. Black Crow, on the other hand, heard another meaning from this laughter and couldn't help but say, Sect Master, could it be that you already have the confidence to win? The Primordium Hegemon said calmly, sure to win? It was hard to say. You think it's a situation where we're evenly matched, but as far as Chun Shi and Subhuti are concerned, so long as a variable like Lin Sun arrives, then it would be sufficient to cause me to suffer a crushing defeat in this game. Then what does Sect Master think? Black Crow asked. The Primordium Hegemon said, know yourself and know your enemy. Only then can you win 100 battles. Right now, I know all the details about my opponent like the back of my hand. The only one that can threaten me is Chun Shi. His voice was casual, as if he was stating a fact. The Primordium Hegemon paused for a moment and continued. The only thing I can't be sure of is the variable that is Lin Sun. However, the Ape Ancestor has already set out, and the show will begin once Lin Sun truly arrives. Black Crow really wanted to ask exactly what sort of show it was, but he restrained himself in the end. He was very clearly aware that the sect master was bound to be unable to reveal the secrets of the show before it began. Chunshi. Chunshi. Suddenly, the primordium hegemon muttered, "If you want to stop him, then you probably won't have the chance." Black Crow's heart shook as he guessed a possibility. The sect master's plans were something that even a supreme existence like She would find very difficult to deal with. "Little Crow, just you wait. Once this variable, Lin Sun, arrives and once this game comes to an end, I'll send both you and the ape ancestor to the forbidden area of profundity." The primordium hegemon's voice gradually lowered and vanished, and then there was no further sound. On the other hand, Black Crow's heart rose and fell, and he found it difficult to calm down. Half a month later, the universe, a clear stream gurgled within a verdant forest. The path of severance severed the Tao of the past, present, and future, and it's extremely dangerous. Since ancient times until now, only a small group of people have traversed it. Do So drank as he spoke. However, I haven't traversed it as well, so I don't know what sort of dangers I'll encounter when I step onto the path of severance. The old priest said, "I heard that once one traverses the path of severance, one's cultivation will transform into the true Tao of chaos." Lin Sun was stunned, and then he said, "So that's how it is." When the chaos was split apart, the world was revealed. The world could bear the weight of civilization and the grand Tao, and in this way, it could develop the phenomena and spirits of the world. On the other hand, cultivation was a process of tracing back to the source. For example, from the most superficial Tao aura and Tao insight to the laws of longevity, Saint Tao laws, Emperor Realm laws, eternal laws, all the way until one comprehended the eternal laws. This step-by-step understanding and control of the Grand Tao was a process of tracing back to the essence and source from the surface to the inside. After reaching the boundless realm, the chaos laws grasped in the ruins of wonderful Tao were ultimately a step further in understanding the essence of the Grand Tao. For example, the origin power of heaven and earth comprehended and mastered in the universe was essentially a transformation of the Grand Tao that one mastered. What was a step further than the path of heaven and earth was the true chaos. At that time, one's Grand Tao would transform into the chaos, which was undoubtedly equivalent to touching the most primitive essence of the Tao. My young friend, those old guys in the mystic god realm are waiting for you to go there. What do you think? Do So couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun thought for a while and smiled. I seek my own Tao. Do So and the old priest looked at each other and couldn't help but feel emotional. This wasn't fearlessness, nor was it indifference, but it was a determination in his heart. Then when do you plan to leave this universe? Do So asked. He didn't doubt that Lin Sun couldn't leave this world at all. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, "Wait a little longer." In this half a month, he had already completely refined his cultivation into the way of heaven and earth and reached the state of perfection. He could leave at any time. The reason why he didn't leave was that he was waiting for Xie. "Young brother, I still think that it's most appropriate for Miss Xie to stay here. Not to mention the dangers of severing one's path, merely entering the profound God domain would bring about numerous unpredictable dangers and killing tribulations. Under such circumstances, it would be too dangerous to allow Miss Xie to follow us." The old priest couldn't help saying. Lin Sun shook his head with a smile. "I might have done this in the past, but not now. What's more, even if I wanted to let her stay, she would never agree." Xie, who had been silent all this time, also opened her mouth at this moment and said naturally, "Lin Sun has promised me that we will advance and retreat together, live and die together." Seeing this, the old priest stopped persuading him. Time passed day after day. Xie had been cultivating in seclusion, condensing the qi of heaven and earth. Lin Sun was sitting in silence, and his qi was still. In his sea of consciousness there were all kinds of incredible grand Tao being deduced. Creation, fate, the 5 sequences of the ruins of end. These grand Tao were all fused into the nirvana profundity, and the nirvana profundity was changing along with it and developing infinite mysteries. As early as the spiritual endowed world in the gate of eternity, Lin Sun had completely understood that the reason why he was regarded as a variable was related to the nirvana profundity. Nirvana was a mysterious power that could reshape life and transform it. Possessing such power was like mastering the means of rebirth of a phoenix or breaking out of a cocoon to become a butterfly. What it achieved was the change of life. The way of life was regarded as a higher path than the eternal way, and it was also a grand Tao that existences like Qin Shi and Taichu had been pursuing. The power of nirvana was related to the transformation of life, so it was naturally extremely shocking. With Lin Sun's current cultivation, he already understood that the essence of the nirvana profundity lay in the word change. It could reshape the grand Tao and transform life. Such a variable naturally had the possibility to break everything in the past and subvert the cognition of the world. These days, Lin Sun had been meditating and deducing the mystery of nirvana, and had tried to integrate the mystery of spirit endowing source into nirvana. The quintessence of spirit bestowal was capable of giving birth to countless innate abilities in the world, whereas innate abilities were related to life, and it was equivalent to being related to the profundities of the Tao of life. A long time ago, the primordium ruler had entered the gate of eternity's spirit bestowment realm and comprehended and controlled this spirit bestowment power. It was also from this that Lin Sun determined that the absolute beginning sovereign had long come into contact with the threshold of the Tao of life. His cultivation had also long since been destined to be incomparable to those at the great circle of the boundless realm. On the other hand, Lin Sun, who had mastered the mystery of the source of endowed spirit, had already touched the threshold of the way of life. Moreover, the profundities of rebirth he'd grasped were capable of urging living beings to undergo transformation and rebirth, and this was no different from grasping a grand Tao energy related to the grand Tao of life. In the past, he was limited by his cultivation, so it was very difficult for him to figure out the secrets of rebirth. But now, as he stepped into the great circle of the boundless realm and came into contact with some profundities of the way of life, his understanding of the profundities of nirvana had a great breakthrough. Just like in these days, when he tried to integrate the profundities of spirit bestowal into the profundities of nirvana, the profundities of nirvana that he'd mastered easily and thoroughly integrated with the profundities of spirit bestowal. And in the process of integration, the power of nirvana also underwent a great change, which made Lin Sun's cultivation also undergo a subtle change. That kind of change was very hard to describe. It was as if he'd broken the shackles of his own nature and soul, and was no longer fettered by the realm and the grand Tao. As long as the profundities of nirvana kept getting stronger, his cultivation and life would constantly transform. Of course, this was just Lin Sun's feeling. He didn't know what such a subtle change meant, because in the years since ancient times, the boundless realm was the ultimate realm. The subtle changes produced in this realm hadn't been defined and named by people at all. There weren't even records or legends about it. In other words, all this was like unknown. But Lin Sun was sure that such subtle changes must be related to the way of life. 3 consecutive updates first. There's more in the evening in addition, thanks to Brother Giadaleo for the monthly ticket reward. Chapter 3304. The Grand Completion Boundless Realm was the pinnacle of the eternal Tao path, and also the pinnacle of the path that the world already knew. Is there really a higher path above the eternal path of the Tao? This was still an unsolvable problem in the eyes of the vast majority of boundless realm figures. But in Lin Sun's opinion, he was sure that if there was a path that was superior to the eternal path, then it was definitely the life Tao. Because he had also touched this threshold. Moreover, unlike the others, it seemed to be extremely easy for him to encounter this threshold, and he didn't encounter any difficulty or obstruction at all. He didn't have to be like the absolute beginning sovereign who bitterly probed the profound God domain for 100,000 years and experienced 100,000 years of failure before finally discovering the existence of the spirit endowment world from the eternal vessel that flashed out of the forbidden area of profundity. From there, he came into contact with the profundities of the Tao of life from the spirit endowment quintessence. In the final analysis, Lin Sun had touched the mystery of life a long time ago because he had mastered the nirvana ultimacy. For example, when he saved his disciple, Tang Jiang, it was actually a kind of nirvana for life. It was the same when he saved eldest senior brother. It was merely because he was limited by his cultivation that he didn't know the relationship between the nirvana profundity and the life Tao. Yet now, in the ultimate realm of the boundless realm, when he fused the profundity of spirit creation into the profundity of nirvana and sensed the subtle changes in his body, Lin soon knew that he'd already come into contact with the great Tao that surpassed the eternal Tao in a true sense. That swordsman had once reincarnated in the ruins of Tao. This can be considered a Tao of life, since Senior Chun, she was able to stand shoulder to shoulder with swordsman and absolute beginning. There's no doubt that he's definitely come into contact with the life Tao. Even the reincarnation of the eternal Night Divine Emperor can be regarded as the embodiment of the way of life. After all, the eternal Night Divine Emperor is a talent born from the spiritual origin, and he himself contains the mysteries of the way of life. While meditating, Lin soon thought of a lot of things and unraveled many mysteries in his mind. His understanding of nirvana, Tao, and life was undergoing subtle changes. 1 month later, summer solstice woke up from meditation. His aura had also undergone a shocking change. Grand completion, boundless realm? Noticing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Xia Ji nodded and said, "That's right." Lin Sun suddenly laughed. "Even the eternal Night Emperor in those days is far inferior to you now. Isn't that why she wanted to reincarnate?" Summer Solstice said, "It's just that she cut off her own memories and experiences to make me who I am now." Lin Sun agreed and asked, "Can I leave now?" "It should be fine." Xia Ji stood up while the way of heaven and earth gushed out from her body, and it transformed into a boundless world of eternal darkness. The civilization and grand Tao that it carried were like an array of stars that flowed within it, mysterious and profound. No matter how dark the eternal night was, it was unable to conceal the brilliance of those stars. Boom! At this moment, heaven and earth resonated, and all phenomena trembled. Du So and the old priest, who were cultivating not far away, were alerted by the commotion and rushed over. "Are you leaving?" Du So asked. "It's time to leave," Lin Sun said with a smile. "I'll come back later to have a drink with you two seniors." Du So rolled his eyes. "Do you think we have no chance to break through this realm? Just wait, we'll come to you later." The old priest couldn't help laughing. Good. Lin Sun was speechless and said happily, "No matter when you come to see me, I'll be waiting for you. Who wants to sleep in the same bed with you?" Du So said grumpily, "You just need to prepare the wine." Lin Sun was speechless. Immediately he laughed. Du So's nature and temper were still the same as before. Boom! Heaven and earth roared, and the whole bound of universe produced a strange rhythm. Visible to the naked eye, a piece of fruit of chaos emerged and bathed Xia Ji's graceful and slender figure. The fruit of chaos is attracted so soon. The eyes of Du So and the old priest became subtle. It had only been 2 months since Lin Sun and Xia Ji arrived in the bound of universe. "I'll walk on my own. After arriving at the realm of gods, I'll always wait for you on the platform of God." Soon, Xia Ji turned her head and looked at Lin Sun. She didn't need Lin Sun to remind her to answer herself. Lin Sun nodded with a smile. Before, he had told Xia Ji to wait on the platform of gods after passing through the path of slashing. The platform of gods was very magical. The practitioners who entered for the first time would be protected by the power of the platform. Even if there was an ambush nearby, they couldn't get close to the platform. On the contrary, once they left, they would never be able to return to the platform of gods. Of course, this news was told to Lin Sun by Du South. Du So had mastered a secret method that could appear in the hidden world of gods in a short time to meet the master of the Heart Core and Golden Cicada. Unfortunately, this secret method required a great deal of effort and could only be used once every 1,000 years. It was taught by the master of the Heart Core and was called World's End near at hand. When Lin Sun first arrived at the ruins of Tao, Du So had already used it once. Therefore, Du So knew some things about the platform of gods. Soon, the gate of heaven appeared, and Xia Zhi's figure swept into it and disappeared. Seniors, I'll be taking my leave as well. Lin Sun turned around and cupped his hands at Du So and the old priest. Hurry up. Don't let Xia Zhi wait for too long, Du So urged. The old priest smiled and said, I'm looking forward to the resonance of heaven and earth when you leave. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. Taking a deep breath, he lifted his foot and stepped forward. An invisible door emerged, and when Lin Sun's foot fell, he stepped into the door. Then, his figure and the door disappeared together. This casual and simple scene made the Du So and the old priest look at each other. They couldn't help but feel caught off guard. Did he just leave like this? Where was the resonance of heaven and earth? Where was the fruit of chaos? Why did they all disappear? After a long time, the old priest calmed down and said, Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Such a unique way of leaving is appropriate for Lin Sun. Du So let out a long sigh and said, It's better to meet him less in the future. Otherwise, my Taoist heart will be full of holes. The old priest couldn't help but feel sad. At this moment, both of them had guessed that Lin Sun had probably obtained the fruit of chaos a long time ago and possessed the qualification to leave the bound of universe. That was why he could leave so casually at this moment. On this day, Lin Sun, who had entered the ruins of wonders for less than 5 years, passed through the 9 heavenly gates of the soul's god realm and left. In a boundless void. A path condensed from the origin of chaos ran through it, and it stretched towards the depths, severing the path. In the past eras, there was no lack of people who had passed through the 9 heavenly gates of the soul's god realm, but in the end, they lost their lives on this severing path, and were unable to reach the mystery god realm. This was the most taboo and terrifying path. Taking a step on it and severing the Tao of the past, present, and future, even the Tao Lords and hegemons in the boundless realm had a slim chance of survival. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure appeared out of thin air. Is this the severing path? Lin Sun sensed with his divine sense, but he only felt an illusory chaos, and he couldn't feel anything else. Looks like I have to take a step on it in order to sense its profundities. As he thought, Lin Sun had already taken a step forward, and his figure floated down onto the severing path. In an instant, the scene before Lin Sun's eyes changed abruptly. He seemed as if he was going back in the river of life, and the strange and dazzling scenes of the past flashed before his eyes. After an unknown period of time, when Lin Sun's field of vision became clear, he saw that all the scenes of his past had converged into a river that was reflected in the distant void. The river of my past? Lin Sun's pupils constricted. This scene was extremely similar to the river he saw when he looked back in the origin world, and it reflected everything he'd experienced in the past. Wait. But in next to no time, Lin Sun noticed that it was different. At this moment, all the scenes and experiences of his past that were reflected in the river of the past were covered in an obscure and mysterious aura of calamity. In the end, everything in the past was completely drowned by the torrent of calamity. I understand now. This is the river of calamity that represents the past. In other words, the so-called calamity of severing the Tao. Lin Sun came to a sudden understanding. Right when he thought of this, boom! A bolt of chaotic thunder swept out of the river and rushed towards Lin Sun. There was no way to avoid it because this kind of chaotic thunder had already transcended the shackles of time and space. No matter where Lin Sun was, he would be hit by it. Lin Sun didn't intend to avoid it. When this bolt of chaotic thunder hit Lin Sun's body, it didn't produce much destructive power. But in Lin Sun's mind, he felt as if he was stabbed by a sharp knife. Everything went black in front of Lin's eyes, and he immediately felt that he had turned into a baby lying in swaddling clothes. What appeared in front of him was the handsome face of Yun Qingbai, who was holding a sharp bone saber stained with blood in his hand. And Lin Sun's chest had been cut open, dripping with blood. Did I go back to the time when I was just born? When he realized this, Lin Sun didn't panic, because he was too familiar with such a scene. It was the murder that happened in Lin family a long time ago. At that time, Yun Qingbai sneaked into Lin family with Ba Qi in order to dig away the spiritual vein in Lin Sun's body. All this is real, not a false illusion. It just happened in my past life, just like what I saw in the long river of the tracing world. And what I feel now is the power of the chaotic thunder. No. Is this calamity going to erase me in my past life? Lin Sun's heart trembled when he thought of this. He had entered the tracing world and knew that in the long river of life, practitioners could change their past fate. On the contrary, what he was experiencing now was a calamity of severing the Tao appearing in his past life to erase him in the past. P.S. There's more before 11 p.m. Chapter 3305. The most terrible thing was that all of this was real. Once Lin Sun was in trouble, he would definitely die. Now, he would also meet a calamity and die. Just when he thought of this, Yun Qingbai, who was holding the bone saber, suddenly stabbed at his throat. At this time, Lin Sun was a fragile baby lying in swaddling clothes. How could he block it? At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly realized one thing. The baby in swaddling clothes was his past self after all. The reason why he could sense all this was that he was affected and impacted by the tribulation of Tao cutting. In the final analysis, he had to rely on his present self to resolve this tribulation. In the twinkling of an eye, Yun Qingbai's machete was about to stab the baby to death. However, a big hand appeared at this moment and firmly grasped Yun Qingbai's wrist, so that his machete was about to stab into Lin Sun's throat. The owner of the big hand was Ba Qi, the quasi-emperor. But at this moment, Ba Qi was under the control of Lin Sun. Bang! Ba Qi waved his hand and slapped Yun Qingbai away. At this moment, everything in front of Lin Sun suddenly disappeared like a bubble. But before he could react, his figure appeared in the mind prison and turned into his younger self. It was a simple room with a desk, a bed, and some spiritual materials needed to practice spiritual tattoos. A dim yellow oil lamp shone mottled light in the room. Lin Sun was very familiar with this scene. However, his expression changed. If the power of the tribulation of Tao cutting appeared on Master Lu, he would not be able to save himself from death with his current strength. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly kicked the door open and ran away in the distance with his thin figure. Soon, the entrance of a mind tunnel appeared in Lin Sun's sight. It was Master Lu who threw him into the mind tunnel and let him out of the mind prison. The reason was that there was a transmission formation under the tunnel, which was arranged by Master Lu himself. Without hesitation, Lin Sun jumped into it. Boom! Almost as soon as Lin Sun's figure disappeared, a horrible breath rushed from a distance. It was Lu Boya. He rushed into the mind tunnel as soon as possible. However, he was a step too late. With a roar, the transmission formation in the depths of the mind tunnel operated and disappeared with Lin Sun. He had escaped this calamity. The picture in front of Lin Sun suddenly collapsed. When his vision became clear, he was already in a room in the courtyard of Feiyun village. With the previous two experiences, Lin Sun immediately concluded that Xia Ji was likely to face the Tao cutting tribulation this time. The battle prowess that Xia Ji possessed back then was not something that he could withstand at all. Lin Sun took a deep breath and made a decision almost immediately. He went straight forward and locked the door. Then, he skillfully found an old wooden box in the room, took out the inscribing pen and notes, bit his fingertip, and dipped a drop of blood into the note. Bang! The locked door was broken, and Xia Ji rushed in directly. The white bone spear in her hand was already stabbing at Lin Sun with terrible sharpness. His speed was so fast that it was terrifying. But this blow missed the target. The inscribing pen and notes merged and turned into the heaven accessing place, bringing the figure of Lin Sun in his youth into it. The tribulation also dissipated. Until now, Lin Sun understood. The tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation at this moment was aimed at his past self. This tribulation could appear on anyone in the past, including friends, relatives, and enemies. And now, he was standing on the road of Tao cutting tribulation. There were only two ways to stop it. One was to deal with it with the power of his past self. The other was to use the power of his present self to stop it with the power of his past self. For example, when dealing with Yun Qinbai, his present self used Ba Qi to stop Yun Qinbai. It was worth mentioning that Ba Qi could be used because he was also in that scene at that time. But no matter which way he chose, he must be decisive to find a way out of the desperate situation caused by the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation. For example, in the mine prison, in order to avoid being killed by Lu Boya, choosing to leave through the mine prison's teleportation formation was the only way out. Otherwise, it would be easy for Lu Boya to kill him at that time. In the residence of Feiyun village, Xia Ji was in the courtyard. The only way out was the heaven accessing place. It could be said that in these three fatal tribulations, if Lin Sun acted a little slower, his past self would be killed by the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation. After understanding this, Lin Sun became calmer. Standing on the road, he began to deduce all his past experiences, analyze the possible fatal tribulations in these experiences, and find a way out, and his past self encountered the fatal tribulations again. In Xiao Empire, he met Grandad Zhong on the night when he set foot on heart-cleansing peak of Lin family for the first time. As soon as he saw his situation, Lin Sun turned around and fled. Grandad Zhong chased after him. On the way, Lin Sun was seriously injured and almost killed several times, but he finally got close to the destination. Star Observatory. Boom. The old priest appeared and killed Grandad Zhong in the air. Of course, the old priest was controlled by the present Lin Sun and killed the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation, which was incarnated as Grandad Zhong. In the following time, the tribulations of Tao cutting tribulation appeared in Lin Sun's past life one after another. Every time, Lin Sun almost fell into a desperate situation. For example, on the way to the ultimate land for the first time when he was young, the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation directly turned into Elder Gao Yang, an elder of Zhao Jingshuan's sect at that time. Lin Sun escaped from Gao Yang by taking advantage of the army of resentful souls in the Soul Oblivion Sea. For example, in the Star Chess Sea of the Ancient Desolation, the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation turned into Shi. And at that time, she had a terrifying combat power far beyond that of the Ancient Desolation at present. Fortunately, Lin Sun hid in the heaven accessing place and avoided this terrible killing tribulation. Similar scenes like this were innumerable, and every single one of them was filled with danger and boundlessly terrifying. But gradually, Lin Sun adapted to all this, and the present Lin Sun had deduced all the places where there might be fatal tribulations in his past experience and found a way out. This allowed him, who had passed, to be able to easily deal with dangerous situations when he encountered them again. In the following time, the tribulations of Tao cutting tribulation appeared in the Starry Sky Ancient Path, the Dark World, the Kiliakosm Battle Domain, the Eternal World, the Ruins of Creation, the Kunlun Ruins. On the other hand, Lin Sun became more and more proficient in dealing with them. When Lin Sun headed to the ruins of Tao, this killing tribulation came to an end. Lin Sun's consciousness and mind had completely recovered. He was still on the path of Tao cutting tribulation, but Lin Sun had a strange feeling. After experiencing countless killing tribulations, it seemed as if he'd severed all the karma of the past. It was like a fetter. The Tao of severing the past is actually severing the karma of the past. In this way, even if an enemy tries to trace back to the past to deal with my past self, they won't be able to find a chance to do so. At this moment, Lin Sun understood. This was called severing the past. It wasn't severing past experiences, but the karma of the past, so no matter who it was, they would be unable to shake or destroy his past life. At the same time, Lin Sun felt that the power of the Great Way in his body had undergone an astonishing change at this moment, and all of them were suffused with obscure and vague chaotic charm. However, it was only a part of it, and it hadn't completely transformed into the Great Way of chaos. But such a transformation still refreshed Lin Sun's spirit. As the old priest said, on the path of Tao cutting tribulation, there was a chance for his cultivation to transform into the Great Way of chaos. Boom! A muffled thunder suddenly sounded in the void in the distance. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly widened. In the void, a tall figure came. He was dressed in moon-white clothes, and his long black hair fell to his waist. Whether it was his appearance, his temperament, or even his cultivation, they were exactly the same as Lin Sun. Just like Lin Sun in the mirror. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. This wasn't an illusion. It was the real him. He could even feel the fluctuation of life in this person. Is this the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation for this world? Lin Sun frowned. Not far away, Lin Sun stood in the void and said with a smile, "I'll be you if I kill you. You'll be me if you kill me." This sentence seemed very baffling, and there was a sense of contradiction in it. Lin Sun suddenly calmed down at this moment and said, "There can't be two people who are exactly the same in this world. I'm destined not to be you, and you're destined not to be me." Looking at the Lin Sun opposite him, Lin Sun himself felt extremely strange and extremely repulsed, as if his own existence had been unprecedentedly offended. This made him extremely uncomfortable. "No, you and I have the same cultivation, the same appearance, the same temperament. I'm you in this world, and you're me in this world." In the distance, Lin Sun said indifferently, "Your rejection of me in your heart means that you're rejecting yourself. I'm not rejecting myself, but I'm rejecting something like you that's transformed from the tribulation of Tao cutting tribulation." As he spoke, Lin Sun stepped forward and suddenly punched out. In the distance, Lin Sun stood in the void without dodging, and his figure was directly smashed by the fist energy. But at the same time, Lin Sun coughed up a mouthful of blood, as if the strength of this punch had hit him. Compared to this, shock that couldn't be concealed surged up in Lin Sun's heart. Could that fellow really be me? Otherwise, why is it that I'm the one who's injured when my punch clearly hits him? But if that's the case, then who am I? At this moment, in the distant void, Lin Sun's figure had condensed once more, and he said indifferently, "Don't you understand? You're me, and I'm you. You'll only kill yourself by doing this." It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even if Xia Ji, who had been by Lin Sun's side all these years, was here, she probably wouldn't be able to distinguish the real Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun took a deep breath and suddenly smiled. He pointed at the position of his heart and said, "Unfortunately, you're transformed from the tribulation of Tao cutting after all. Even if you possess the aura of life, you can't possess a true state of mind." The 5th chapter was delivered.